Everything started on the day the online game the protagonist had been playing for 3 years was shut down. Bored, he decided to look for another one, becoming interested in an advertisement that promoted an endless game. Without thinking twice, the man entered the website and chose as the difficulty level the option that said Hell Mode. However, after selecting his talents, the light emitted by his PC screen became brighter, and after that, all they found was his empty chair. In another world, living in a simple little house, we discover that 5 years had already passed since the young man reincarnated as a baby. Now a little older, he is a servant who cannot have another job nor leave the village. His mother, who also works in the same place, tries to let him live as a child, always refusing the help he offers. Meanwhile, her son hides everything about his past life, intending not to scare his new family. Stepping away a bit, he opens his magic book, stopping on the page that explains about summonings, which are creatures generated from a card using magical power that can serve as partners in battles. The only problem is that the boy still cannot fight magical beasts, and his main goal is to obtain the blessing of one of the 20 creatures listed in the book, which will serve to increase his status. Currently, his physical strength is at the level of a common adult. Being enough for the moment, we discover that controlling the status is controlling the game. While the boy was reading, the afternoon bell starts to ring. Suddenly, another child appears, calling him to play, and accidentally steps on the creature that Alan had summoned. Not caring, the little boy agrees to play with Krina, his training partner, who also cannot hunt magical beasts. Both position themselves face to face with wooden swords, pretending to be knights. In his mind, Alan says that this is embarrassing for a 35-year-old man. Krina attacks first, showing how fast she is. The two engage in a sword fight, with our boy blocking the strikes to defend himself, revealing that he increases agility, but his body still cannot handle too much. With that, the little girl manages to break his sword for the 10th time. Smiling, the young knight says that fighting with him is more fun than fighting with her father, while the boy feels embarrassed. The boy's father appears and tells him not to feel bad about the defeat. After all, he just fought against a holy swordswoman. Krina, on the other hand, reveals that she would rather be just a normal swordswoman. Excited, the girl says that the boy also has a special talent, but the man claims that the priestess said he has none. We discover that in reality, no one can read what is written on Alan's talent bar because of the distortion errors in the characters. Therefore, all he hopes for is that this will be fixed soon, so that one day he can become a summoner. Comforting his son, the man says that even without talent, he is still very proud of Alan, and that one day he will become a very strong man. Reflecting, the boy thinks about how crazy it is to be the son of a very poor family whose parents are younger than him. Krina's father appears to take her to the knights who came to meet the holy swordswoman. Everyone heads to the town. Upon seeing the little girl, the commoners who are different from the servants are unsure if that child really possesses such talent. Another boy appears to pick a fight with Alan, saying there's nothing for someone without talent to do there. Angry, Krina says her friend is strong, but the scabby boy claims the young man is nothing more than a servant. The girl's father and Alan's father arrive just in time, interrupting the fight, and suddenly, the village chief announces that the knights have arrived. Everyone stands up to welcome the celebrities. Enchanted, the protagonist's friend says that the leader of the Sword Knights is amazing. Approaching, the man asks if she is the Holy Swordswoman. Happy, Krina says yes while introducing herself. Catching everyone by surprise, the man says that falsifying a talent is a crime and therefore a duel must be held, with the goal of confirming whether the information is true. Moreover, if the girl or her father refuse, they will be sentenced to death. Grabbing her sword with a shine in her eyes, Krina tells her father that it's okay and that she will do whatever it takes. We discover that the girl will have to fight against the knight Ryfriend, who has the talent of Lancer. Nervous, the girl's father tries to stop it, but is blocked by the guards. The battle begins with the little girl attacking with everything she has first, leaving everyone shocked as she swings so smoothly a sword that is 3 times her size. Alan thinks that his friend has been playing knight since she was 3 years old and her swordsmanship skills surpass even his. Without mercy or pity, the knight kicks Krina far away. The girl crashes into a wall, creating a large crater. Desperate, her father tries at all costs to get closer, but he is once again stopped, just like the protagonist, who is still too weak to fight. Suddenly, the little girl stands back up, revealing that she has an extra skill. Jumping into the air, Krina starts spinning, before coming down with full force and hitting the knight, who doesn't go flying only because of the sword in his hands. Without hesitation, the little one continues delivering blow after blow, until the leader of the knights steps in and says that the fight is over. With a smile on her face, Krina says that her opponent is very strong, calling him an old man. Standing up, the knight says he is not an old man, then falls to his knees right after, showing everyone that he was defeated by the Holy Swordswoman, who is a child. Worried, the girl's father asks if she is hurt, while Alan feels proud of his friend's strength. Smiling, the leader of the knights says that the king will be happy to see what Krina did to the opponent's sword, The young girl approaches and asks if she can become a knight, but the man says only when she turns 12, at which point he will send an instructor for her entrance exam at the Academy for Talented Children. Thinking to himself, Alan concludes that the number of stars is crucial for the status, and since he seems to be the only one living in hell mode, he will have to work 100 times harder to grow. Opening his status window, the boy reveals that even after 5 years, he is still at level 1, which means his life as a summoner is just beginning. We discover that after the Sword Master was discovered, the village where Alan lived was renamed to Karita Village. Now at 6 years old, the boy managed to reach level 3 of his throwing skill, but he will need to practice more to reach hell mode. While they were having dinner, the boy's mother says that his father is late, which is strange. The man is the leader of the beast hunting team in autumn and winter, all to earn more money. Suddenly, a group carrying someone on a kind of stretcher approaches Alan's house. That someone is Rodan, Teresa's husband and the protagonist's father. As they approach, Krena's father says that the man's wound has already closed, because they were lucky enough to find a Myra's flower in the forest, and the knights had given them money to search for the plant. Intrigued, our boy thinks that his father can defeat 3-meter-tall great boars, so it doesn't make sense for him to be wounded. Explaining, Krena's father says that the boy's father got injured while trying to protect some idiot citizens who broke the teen formation. The day dawns, and fortunately, Rodan wakes up, surrounded by his family who slept by his side. When he enters the room and sees the scene, Alan thinks that technically he is the oldest there, but he doesn't know why he feels that there is an invisible wall between him and his family. Gelder approaches and tells the man to rest until he is fully recovered. In the meantime, he will take care of everything. Taking action, the protagonist joins the conversation and says that actually he is the one who will take care of his father's work. The next day, he already starts working, surprising Krena's father, who realizes that the boy was serious. While he works harvesting supplies, we discover that farmers have to give 60% of their crop to the landlords. So our boy will need to work hard. 2 days later, he finds himself proud looking at the amount of food he gathered, deciding that the next step is to get meat. Opening his magic book, Alan says that the experience he accumulated was enough to unlock the card enhancement skill and increase his status. Suddenly, the information that he can now summon Bounta shocks him. Without hesitation, he summons the creature, thinking that if everything goes well, he'll be able to catch about 50 birds. The boy summons 3 Bountas, but for some reason, no bird seems to hear the noise of the creatures. Out of nowhere, a very big bird decides to appear. It is an Albaharam, a monster that inspired Rodan to choose the name he gave to Alan. The creature charges at the frogs that the boy summoned. Taking a deep breath, the protagonist says that the bird must be about 2 meters tall, but this is his chance to hunt a demonic beast. With great courage, he throws a stone that hits the enemy's head squarely. Charging forward, Alan attacks the Albaharan with his sword, quickly realizing that he is still not strong enough to defeat the creature with a single blow. Changing tactics, the boy summons Pachas, a kind of dog, then orders the animals to attack the bird with their sharp teeth. The pack quickly obeys and corners the bird. However, 15 Pachas are still not enough to take down a rank T monster. Changing its focus, the Albaharan lunges at Alan with his huge claws. Nervous, our boy thinks that his end has come as he won't be able to hold on for long. Trying to save himself, he summons insects called Chew, which quickly begin attacking the bird, aiming to drink its strawberry juice. The plan works, and the creature eases the pressure it was putting on the boy, who feels happy that his guess was right. However, because he used 3 insects and 15 dogs, the blessing status decreased. Even so, Alan says that the most important thing is that his opponent is tired, and now he has a chance to win. The little boy attacks the bird again, delivering many blows with his sword. Sometime later, a notification appears saying that Albaharan has been defeated, and therefore the boy will receive 100 experience points. Happy, Alan starts jumping and shouting because he managed to defeat a huge creature with his small hands. Smiling, surrounded by his animals, he says that doing this was even more amazing than he thought. Job done, the little one heads back home, leaving everyone shocked. Upon seeing him tying up the huge Albaharan to roast it, Gelda approaches and says that he delivered his message to the village chief, who promised that if more Albaharans are defeated, he will be able to keep all the profits. Determined, we discover that Alan decided to fight a new bird every 3 days, resulting in the increase of all his stats and his level, which is now 2. Happy, he says that finally after 6 years he leveled up, and even though it took a long time, it was expected from hell mode. Looking at the book, he realizes that his strength and magic are also higher, even more than he had planned. A month after his father was attacked, Alan says that the time has come, and entering the house announces that he needs to say something. Seated, his parents listen attentively. The little boy then says that when he was 1 year old, Alina told him that he was blessed with special wisdom. Teresa says that this is not possible, but Rodan remembers that the woman mentioned by the protagonist is the ruler of the world, and caressing the boy's head, says that since his birth, he noticed that he had something different. Therefore, he believes everything his son said. Alan apologizes for having hidden the game, but his father surprises him, stating that he knows the boy needs to pass the first challenge because of the scar that disappeared from his face, but that whenever things get too difficult, he must remember that he has a family to help him. Joking, Rodin asks if Gelda already knows the story, which will serve to shut the mouth of the man who only talks about how amazing Krina is. December arrives and Alan prepares to take the final step to ensure his family's survival during winter. Going to the city with Gelda, he says that he will trade the albahara meat for firewood and salt, then asks the man how a farmer can become a citizen. The man says it is necessary to have 10 coins. Reflecting, our boy concludes that since his family has 5 members, he will therefore need 50 coins, since his plan before leaving Karina is to take his family out of servant life. After a few days counting at the market, Alan realizes that he will need to eliminate about 500 albaharans to get the money. Stopping in front of a store, he reveals that he would like to buy a new weapon, but needs to save for food and necessities. Interrupting his thoughts, the scabby boy, son of the shop owner, appears and asks what the boy is doing there. The protagonist tries to simply ignore him, but the boy says that he will only leave after they fight. Our boy thinks that he hates these useless fights that give no XP. Even so, he grabs his sword and says that he will take down anyone who stands in his way. Without thinking twice, the scabby boy charges forward, calling him weak and trash. Blocking the first attack, Alan realizes that the boy is nothing compared to Krina, who has 3 stars. Successfully, he subdues his opponent, who, sweating cold, promises that he will defeat him next time. Walking away, our boy says that next time he will buy something. 9 months later, we see Krina holding the protagonist's new baby brother. While he is once again battling the axe user, the young girl then asks if Mashu wants to play. Our boy says that his opponent's movements are very obvious, and the boy replies that he knows. Suddenly, Mashu calls his attention to say that playing knights is very fun. As night falls, Gelda and Rodin appear, announcing that they were summoned by the village chief, who said that this year they will need to kill a total of 15 boars. To make things worse, there will be more civilians participating in the battles. Hearing this makes Teresa very nervous. The man then says there's nothing to be done, and that the Lord warned that next year the number could increase to 20. Listening to all of this, Alan thinks that it seems like monster hunting is being promoted, which is very problematic. Interrupting, the boy loudly tells everyone that the creator gave him wisdom. Therefore, his family should let him handle the situation. We arrive in October again when Rodin finally returns to work, making everyone happy to see him. Observing, the protagonist feels happy that his father is fully recovered. Kneeling down, the man tells him not to get too close to the fight, since he is only there to watch and learn. Another boy approaches and says that if he gets into danger, Rodin doesn't need to protect him, but the man simply asks the boy to stay focused. With the increase in the number of targets, the team now has 20 people who are already fully prepared. Looking at the rookies, our boy concludes that he will need to assist both during the hunt. We discover that this is the first time Alan has left the village, after living in the place for 7 years. Seeing the road, he is enchanted to notice that it is the same one the knights use to arrive where he lives. His father calls his attention to warn that the path is not that way. The team finally arrives at the boar hunting area. A little further away, the protagonist says that Mount Hariryu, where the white dragon he will hunt one day lives, is right in front of him. Suddenly, someone appears shouting that the creatures are coming. Behind the man, we can see a huge boar full of sharp teeth. Scared, Alan says the creature is terribly powerful, while Gelda and the rest of the team members say that it's time to shut the beast's snout. Everyone charges at the creature with their spears, which ends up being immobilized quickly. Watching everything, our boy realizes that the plan consists of attracting the prey, holding it, and then attacking its main points. Turning to the rookies, he tells them that it's their turn, showing that he will never allow the newcomers to charge straight ahead again. Since that resulted in his father's accident, therefore, the boys must first hide while waiting for the right opportunity. Summoning Denka, Alan orders him to join the attack as well. The big boar starts spewing its strawberry juice from its mouth, while our boy can only think about how cool that is. Suddenly, the power of the 2 rookies starts to increase, which makes them both very happy, as it also makes the protagonist happy, who thinks that in a short time the boys might be able to be on the front line, and the mission to eliminate 15 boars will be successfully completed. Looking at his status, Alan realizes that he also gained experience and is now at level 3. Concluding that until he gets 50 coins, he will hunt more boars and albaharons to level up and change his life. After 5 months, we discover that the boy managed to level up his summoning skill and has been training his magic every day. Opening the book, the protagonist realizes that now that he is at level 6, he can summon ranky animals, and that there is another noticeable change, being the ability to store infinite tools in a kind of black hole called storage. In addition, he can now collect magic stones found in the bodies of magical beasts and use them to improve or create ranky animals. Since ranky stones are worthless, he concludes that he can collect many in the forest, which will be a very exhausting task. 3 months pass and Alan becomes able to summon ranky animals, being shocked by the sensation when doing it, since now he can finally see his path. Mouth open, he realizes that summoning classes take on different roles in battle, being something very powerful. Alan finally managed to get a glimpse of his future, where an army of summoned beasts can defeat any enemy, and he is the leader of such an army. The day arrives when the Lord will visit the village, yes, the same one who wants 20 boars in the next hunt. Alan is together with the village chief, and in front of him stands Baron Granbeal. The man is there to witness the hunt up close and has brought many people with him. He thanks the village chief for the reception while apologizing for not being able to reverse the king's order regarding the hunt for 20 boars. Mouth open, our boy thinks the story is getting bigger and bigger. Granbeal asks if the little one beside the man is his son, but the village chief says that actually the child is the son of the hunter Rodan. Being quite mean, the Baron's daughter asks if, in that case, the boy is his servant's son, immediately being scolded by her father. Cecil apologizes while glaring at Alan, who in his mind says that staring at him like that won't change anything. The Lord then asks the protagonist to show the way, warning that his strongest knights will also join the hunt. Boldly, our boy says that if the villagers work together, they can reach the goal according to his father. Intrigued, Granbeal asks if that is true. Suddenly, someone announces that the boar hunting group has returned. We see the teen bringing colossal boars into the village. Shocked, the Baron asks how the men managed to kill 3 boars in a single expedition, and why they are wearing armor. Explaining, Alan says that the suits were made from the boar hides the Baron gave him last year. Impressed, the man asks if that means only 17 boars are left, but our boy says that actually only 10 remain. Granbeal asks how that's possible if they started just half a month ago. The protagonist then says that a larger team made everything possible. Therefore, they can handle the quota for this year on their own. Satisfied, the Baron says that in that case, he doesn't need to worry anymore. Taking advantage of the moment, the protagonist says that his father would like to know if they can keep the boar hides in future hunts. The Baron accepts the request, but Ismaik asks if they shouldn't check whether Rodan really asked for that. Granbeal says it's unnecessary. Then Alan, Gelda, and Rodan head to the village chief's house. Sitting on his throne, the Lord says that the Order for Territory Recovery has spread across the country for 15 years. And while several villages failed, Karina completed the mission masterfully. The Lord then calls the 2 men forward, because he heard that both had been leading the hunts for 10 years, always working hard to contribute to the village's development. Therefore, they deserve to be rewarded for their bravery. So from that moment on, they are no longer servants but commoners along with their families. Rodan and Gelda look at each other shocked. Before they start thinking non-stop, we see that Alan is trembling, but with happiness, because now he is free to leave the village and hunt wherever he wants. Granbeal continues and says that all other servants who have been hunting for 10 years or more will also be rewarded, then asking why they decided to start hunting large rank sea boars. Alan reveals in his mind that he doesn't know either, and looking at his father, he notices that he looks uncomfortable. Gelda steps forward and decides to tell the story. We discover that 13 years ago, they started exploring the land with other servants. However, in autumn, boars attacked them and stole all their food, which is why Rodan had the idea to hunt them. They were lucky and managed to defeat one creature, but lost a friend during the battle, causing Alan's father to feel guilty forever. Granbeal says he understands and believes the man is telling the truth. Thus, as a lord must reward the hard work of his people, he will also reward Rodan for his bravery in the past, so that the man may ask him for whatever he wants. A bit awkwardly, the protagonist's father asks that the man allow his son to work in his house where he will be very useful. Our boy widens his eyes, completely shocked, as does the Baron, who is confused. Sweet and cold, Alan asks his father to take it back, but the man says that Granbeal can use the boy as a messenger. Beside the Lord, 2 men say they see no problem with that. The protagonist wonders how he will escape from this situation. Suddenly, the Baron says he won't accept that suggestion, but that he will make the boy a servant of his house, making the little one's brain stop functioning for a few moments. Suddenly, Rodan calls his attention, and looking at his father, he sees that he is crying. With not much else to do, Alan prepares himself, but not to refuse, instead to say that he will be under the care of the Lord. While thinking that there is no way to refuse that's how he became a servant of the Baron's house and had to leave, which made Krenna sad. Approaching, he asks his friend to take care of herself, and noticing that she was feeling very bad, suggests that they play nights before his departure. Teresa asks the 2 not to dirty their clothes while the rest of the family watches them play happily. Our boy, who now has 8 stars, says that Krenna can start. Without hesitation, the girl charges forward, just like Alan initiating a sword battle. The spectators suddenly become shocked when they see that the protagonist is pushing his friend back. Determined, our boy says in his mind that he is going to win that fight, pinning Krenna by placing the sword against her neck. The little girl is shocked that she lost, but her friend says that actually it's a tie, so they should fight again another day to settle the draw. Krenna shakes his hand, saying that she will become stronger by then. Thinking to himself, Alan reveals that since his friend will be going to the academy soon, the chance of them meeting again is small. And even though he used all his magic stones in that fight, it's good to see the little girl smiling before he leaves. Teresa approaches and hugs him, as does Mashu. Looking at his brother, he tells him to be strong and protect Mura. The scabby boy also appears and gives Alan a dagger. Handling the object, our boy realizes that it's from the boy's family store. Both say their goodbyes, and Rodan says that after all, the blonde kid is a good child. About to get into the carriage, the protagonist thinks that his life is about to change. His father then says that his future is not to be a servant forever, so he must make good use of this opportunity. The boy enters the vehicle while watching through the window, all those he loves being left behind. Already on the road, he promises that he will give nothing less than his best. In this new stage of his life outside Karina, we arrive at the city of Granville, more specifically at Granville's mansion, where Alan is already being exploited by Cecil, who wants the apple at the top of the tree. We discover that after leaving his village, our boy became the personal servant of the girl, obeying everything she asked. After getting the fruit, the young girl says that it is very sour and orders the boy to go to the market to buy another. Smiling so he doesn't cry, he says that day after day he receives orders from an 8-year-old girl and hasn't even had the chance to hunt. Suddenly, an airship in the sky catches his attention. Irritated, Cecil says that the vehicle is a magic ship and asks if he has never seen one. Smiling, the girl says that her brother will return from the academy in the spring and orders Alan to hurry. After another day as a servant, our boy always returns to the attic at the back of the mansion, where his room is, smelling a magic plant that restores his magical energy as soon as he wakes up. We discover that even though the room is small, since he stays there alone, the boy can practice magic as much as he wants. After getting dressed, he heads to the kitchen to have breakfast, being well received by another worker. It's Riskel. Concerned, the man asks if it's really okay for the boy to be Cecil's servant. It is revealed that in Granville's house there are 30 servants in total, where those who work little are not counted. Leaving the kitchen, our boy heads to Cecil's room. His two main functions in the house are taking care of the girl and serving meals. For the noble family in this case, we see that everyone's meal is simple, just like the servants. Lady Granville then says that Alan learned things quickly. The boy says that everyone helped him a lot. Enchanted, the woman says that he doesn't even seem like a servant. Wiping his mouth, the Lord then says that the boy has no talent, revealing that the news has leaked. Cecil doesn't miss the chance to say that, unlike him, she's a sorceress. Our boy says that it's amazing, but in his mind, he reveals that this talent is only 2 stars. Angry, the girl's father scolds her, saying that she should reveal her talent like that, then asks what Thomas' talent is. Crying, the boy apologizes and says that he has none either, but that he would like to study at the academy. Still in his thoughts, Alan says that having 2 out of 3 children with talents is very rare, concluding that a noble family has its own concerns. Joining the conversation, Thomas' mother says that he doesn't need to apologize. Granville agrees, because since he was accepted into the Lord's household, he will meet many people without talents there. Lady Granville says that she met the Baron at a ball in that place, which makes Cecil and the boy excited. However, the girl's brother says that she will be going to the academy. Hearing all of this, the protagonist concludes that Cecil, Krena, and Dagara won't get along. Taking advantage of his half-day off, our boy decides to go to the market on a walk that will take 2 hours, which, if he starts from the south gate, will take 4 hours. Suddenly, he finds the Adventurers Guild headquarters, an organization made up of course, adventurers. People who make a living hunting monsters, exactly the job that Alan wants to have. The receptionist then says that adventurers can only register when they reach 12 years old. Our boy realizes that he will have to work as a servant for a few more years, but that he won't give up on his dream. As he was leaving the place, a mission request board catches his attention. Approaching it, he notices that there are many creatures to hunt, but the board doesn't say where they usually live. Out of nowhere, someone arrives and asks what a child is doing there. Warning that the place isn't a playground, Alan then asks where he can find the kind of monster listed on the board. Even intrigued, the man says it's difficult to reach the places where the monsters live since they are near the Dragon Mountain. The protagonist remembers that the giant boars are also born somewhere on the mountain. Getting bolder, he asks if the man knows the roads around the kingdom, which makes the man irritated. Pointing to the picture of a Mutter Gauch, Alan says that unlike the others, the notice says where to hunt that kind of monster. Walking away, the man says that he should leave that to the knights. Being persistent, our boy then asks about the white dragon. The adventurer stops and says that the one who will deal with the mysterious creature will also be the knights. Alan thinks that even though the reward is high, the mission must be considered very dangerous since no one seems willing to try. Suddenly, 2 young girls approach, and one of them is enchanted by the color of our boy's hair. He thanks her and decides to leave since he has heard everything he needed and already knows what to do next. We arrive in mid-November. Running, the protagonist says that it will snow soon. At the north gate of Granville, someone asks if he has the pass. Showing the Baron's crest, the boy says yes. The guard apologizes for stopping him and lets him through. After spending days preparing, our boy is happy to finally be outside. And with an entire day off, he can now go in and out of Karina freely. The guard asks if the boy shouldn't go with someone since it could be dangerous, but looking ahead, he no longer sees anyone. Thinking, Alan says it will be bad if he gets too close to the mountain and finds high-level monsters. So he will keep an eye out for rank D monsters like the Albaharon. After running 10 kilometers, he decides to summon Hook to test if the bird obeys his commands correctly. Successfully, he praises the bird, happy that it is much smarter after the upgrades. Summoning several hooks, he orders the birds to use their hawk eyes to find monsters. After some time, Alan concludes that the monster encounter rate is quite low, deciding to take his dagger from the inventory. Placing the weapon on his waist, he asks the object to lend him its strength. One of his birds returns, indicating the direction of a possible monster. Walking through the forest, the boy wonders if the path is correct, realizing that he needs to give clearer instructions. To his surprise, a little further ahead, he finds several monsters. More specifically, goblins that are about 1.5 meters tall. The creatures notice his presence and charge to attack. To deal with the 5 monsters, Alan summons Tamas, who have between 50 and 100 strength and the ability to scratch. The goblins stop running as soon as they see the animals. Approaching, our boy says that he is counting on his rank he summons. The Tamas surround the monsters. Thinking to himself, the boy says that within a 50-meter diameter, he can summon his animals to block his prey's escape, just to be sure. The goblins start running again at high speed, while Alan orders the Tamas to use their claws to attack. Obeying, the summoned creatures begin to annihilate the enemies, delivering blow after blow without any pause. When one goblin is defeated, the boy receives a message that he gained 200 experience points. Suddenly, a buffed monster charges full force at one of the Tamas, ending it with a single blow. Worried, the protagonist thinks that apparently he won't be able to win that quickly, deciding to summon a Jiha, a large butterfly that has the ability of scales. Such an ability puts enemies to sleep, and Alan decides to take advantage of the moment. He throws a stone at the unconscious goblin, discovering that just like what happened with Albaharan, he is still not able to kill D-rank monsters with stones. One of the Tamas takes over, and thus, in less than 2 hours, our boy earns 1,000 experience points. Smiling, he says the hunt is being more efficient than he thought. And approaching one of the defeated goblins, he starts deciding what to do with the creature's body. Grabbing his dagger, he opts to do what he likes least: collect magic stones, which are the lifeline of the summoner, concluding that this type of monster is very good for that. Later, we learn that Alan defeated 80 goblins and 5 horned rabbits, receiving 16,050 experience points. Additionally, he also learned more about Aegea's ability, as well as about the buff effect of insect-type summons. Since he lost some Tamas, the boy concludes that he will have to collect more stones to create new ones. But since it's getting late, he decides to summon his hooks to go home. The problem is that the birds don't move. Nervous, Alan asks if the creatures can't see that it's getting dark, discovering that the eyes of his summons are similar to those of normal birds. 1 month after his first hunt, the boy is already at level 12, going out to hunt every 6 days, even without having good equipment and weapons yet, since he's saving money for that. The only problem is that he earns only 50 silver coins as his servant every month. One day, he is called to Gambriel's office. At his desk, the man says the boy has been doing an excellent job, but since that day he tried to flee before sunset again, he would like to know what he has been doing on his days off. Choosing to be careful, Alan says he goes out to hunt monsters outside the city, leaving the Lord shocked. Explaining, our boy says he is the son of a hunter, and that is his family's way of life. Without showing much reaction, the man seems to have bought the story. Confirming this, Gambriel says he understands. After all, the boy is the son of a hero. Interrupting, the butler asks what he did with the horned rabbits he killed, showing that he doesn't know everything the boy hunts, and that if the boy is selling the animals to some butcher, he better stop immediately, because from that moment on, he will earn 1 silver coin for each animal he brings. Hearing this makes Alan very happy, since now he can hunt with pride. 6 days later, the boy finds himself eating a fruit while making a plan to kill 100 goblins and 5 horned rabbits. Hook catches his attention, apparently wanting a fruit in his hands. However, the protagonist notices that something is wrong when the bird retreats in another direction. While running, our boy thinks that it's very far and that he had instructed the bird to look for prey within 3 kilometers. As he gets closer, he hears voices and someone telling Marushi to run, seeming like a fight. We see a young girl standing in front of a group of enraged goblins. Stating that she won't let the monsters pass, Levin is on the ground, injured on another girl's lap. Alan quickly realizes that they are the people he met at the guild. Without hesitation, he grabs an iron ball, revealing that he got 3 of those custom-made spheres from a weapon shop. Our boy throws the first ball and hits one of the monsters squarely, surprising the girl and another goblin. Finally appearing, he says he's there to help, then throws another iron ball which hits another monster. When he throws the 3rd sphere, the goblin puts its arm in front of its face to protect itself. It works. Even without an arm, the creature remains standing. Wary, the protagonist realizes he's on his own since he doesn't want to use his summons in front of other people. Drawing his dagger, he says he'll take care of the enemies on the right, so she should handle the ones on the left. As he charges forward, Alan thinks that until that moment, he had always avoided fighting goblins directly. His strike hits the creature, staining his clothes with its strawberry juice. All brave, he decides to go for the next opponent. Meanwhile, the girl manages to annihilate a monster. Even injured, she tells Levin that she's done. However, the boy is in very bad shape and Marushi, who is a healer, is almost out of mana. Desperate, the girl with the eye patch starts crying. After finishing the job, Alan approaches the trio, leaving the girls shocked by so much skill. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, he asks if the girls want some herbs that he has. Both accept, saying they will pay whatever it takes. Our boy then takes a recovery herb from the storage, while apologizing in his mind for using the boy as a guinea pig since he's not sure if it will work. The large wound on Levin's abdomen starts to close until it completely disappears. Frightened, the boy wakes up, asking if he passed God's trial. The girl with the eye patch then explains what happened. Approaching her, the protagonist decides to heal her arm as well. Shocked, the young people ask if that is a Myra's flower and how he can have two types of precious herbs. We discover that the flower restores the physical strength of the wounded person, while the recovery herb can only heal up to a certain point. Looking at the boy's face, Levin says he met him at the guild and asks what kind of talent he has. Our protagonist says he has none. Standing up, the trio states that they will reward him, but he only thinks about going back to hunting. Insisting, Levin asks if, besides not telling anyone about him, there's anything else the group can do. After thinking a little, Alan says he would like them to give him the magic stones from the goblins and 100 rank E stones. The trio agrees and decides that it's time to return to the city. Alone again, our boy summons Hook since he doesn't need to check anything else and can go back to hunting. When the creature appears, he asks why it didn't follow his instructions to stay away from other people, and if the bird wanted to help the adventurers. Hook gets sad. Alan then realizes that his summon is autonomous, different from what he thought since he always believed summons should simply follow the master's orders. However, it's clear that the creature followed its own will, showing itself to be a different type of summon created by the god of that world. Petting the bird, he apologizes and says he doesn't blame it for anything, and that next time he'll think better about his instructions in case it needs to help someone again. Spreading its wings, Hook shows it is happy with what it heard. After a few days, Alan, who now knows that summons have their own consciousness, continued his mission. Besides having obtained 100 rank E-magic stones, he also discovered how to progress as a summoner, and hunting became something really useful. One day, at the end of December, the boy was caught by surprise by the leader of the knights while sweeping the house. We discover that sometimes the knights come to exchange information with the Baron since one of their duties is to protect him, even though the army wasn't created to fight other armies. While eating, the visitor asks if that is horned rabbit meat that Alan got. Excited, Cecil confirms. The man then says that Karina Village successfully defeated 20 large boars. Smiling, our boy says he's happy to hear that, while Thomas states that Rodin really is incredible. Then asking why they aren't eating boar meat at that moment, the question leaves the protagonist confused. He wonders if the tons of meat were then taken to the royal capital by the king's order. Still thinking, he says that it seems the Baron's children eat less meat than the servants in Karina. Thomas calls him over to ask if he can bring a white deer next time, which irritates Cecil since technically the deer is hers. The boy then tells his sister that it's almost New Year's, whispering in the girl's ear. Alan quickly says that he'll do what was asked, making Lady Granville laugh. Thinking, our boy states that a white deer is rank C, like the big boar, and since his father has already hunted that animal, it's now his turn. Outside, we can see that it's snowing. The boy's little frogs jump and make noise non-stop, attracting the big white deer, which approaches snorting. Unfortunately for it, it was all a trap. Holding a shovel, our boy appears, stating that he can't call himself a summoner if he can't use his abilities. We can see that the deer fell into a large hole made by a mole that is also one of the boy's summons. After defeating the beast, he receives only 2,500 experience points, which frustrates him. Looking at the deer, Alan says that even so, he will be praised for this. At the Baron's house, someone shouts, warning that a monster has appeared. But in fact, it's the deer that the boy hunted. Tired, he says that he did what the young master asked him to do. Leaving Granville shocked and Thomas excited. Looking at his mother, the boy says that now they no longer have to worry about the New Year's party. And approaching, he thanks Alan. A bit distant, the Lord asks if the boy really has no talent, because at 8 years old and alone, he managed to capture a rank C monster. Intrigued, he asks for them to check the boy's background again. After his achievement, the protagonist received the right to hunt once a week and bring edible meat. His salary was also doubled, and now he earns 100 silver coins, which makes him satisfied, especially because he can now hunt twice a week. March arrives. Getting out of the carriage, Cecil tells Alan to hurry because today is the day to meet Oni-sama. It's the Baron's eldest son, who lives in the school dormitory in the city. The magic airship arrives, leaving the girl thrilled. Enchanted, our boy says it's amazing to see that up close, revealing that he knows the airship is powered by magic stones. Thinking, he states that in that world, clocks follow the duodecimal system, being quite advanced. Holding a suitcase, the boy appears, asking how his little sister is doing. Cecil hugs him and says she is fine. Looking at Alan, Mihi says he looks very young and asks how long he has been a servant. Our boy answers while the girl says her servant is a hunter. Kneeling down, the boy gives a gift to his sister, who promises to take good care of the beautiful butterfly. Happy, both enter the carriage, while the protagonist can only think about how Mashu and Miura are doing. Since it's the first hunting day since Mihi arrived, Cecil ordered Alan to bring lots of food. Arriving at the Baron's house completely loaded, he thinks the animals are too big to fit through his infinite storage, so he had to walk through the streets carrying the creatures. When he arrives, he sees Mihi fighting the leader of the knights. Nimbly, the boy manages to block the man's attack. Surprised, the protagonist says the boy's movements are really good and that it's the first time he's seen the commander using his sword. The man then says that the young man has improved a lot over the past year. Cecil, who was watching, notices that Alan has arrived. Approaching, she says that the head chef will be happy. Mihi notices how good our boy is and, holding his sword, asks if he has some time to spare. The protagonist agrees to duel, and the commander hands him his sword, called Misril. Before anything else, he opens his magic book to check his status, which is currently in hunting mode. The leader of the knights then tells the two to get ready. We see that the Baron's eldest son has only 1 star, while Alan has 8. Starting the fight, the protagonist thinks he must be careful not to get hurt. He charges with the big sword, but is blocked by his opponent, who, after changing movement, says, "Here I go." Our boy is pushed back while wondering how his strike did nothing. Realizing next that he is losing in speed. Changing strategy, he attacks in the air, but Mihi blocks the attack with just 1 hand. The leader of the knights tells Lady Granville to stay calm because her eldest son won't lose to someone who has never been to the academy. Proving the man right, the boy disarms Alan and places the sword at the boy's neck, declaring that the duel ends there. Smiling, he says the protagonist is excellent for someone so young, while the protagonist is shocked at how strong the boy is. Thomas and Cecil approach, impressed by how fast Mihi is. Mihi says he has to be because he will fight in a dungeon during the holidays, and if he doesn't succeed, he will have to leave the academy. Confident, the boy says it's a difficult task, but the sacred sword Doberig is the one that gave him the weapon he uses now. Hearing the conversation, Alan thinks that with that information, he will improve 100 times faster in hell mode, and, interrupting the conversation, asks Mihi to fight him again right now. Without hesitation, the boy agrees to duel, just asking that the boy take care of his sister. Our boy thinks that, at this rate, he will be Cecil's servant for his whole life. A few days later, Mihi returns to the academy. The beginning of April arrives, and Viscount Colonel goes to Granville's house, who welcomes him with joy. Alan asks for permission to serve something to the men while thinking about how a Viscount is a higher rank than a Baron. The man says that a servant with dark hair is something rare, then grabs the famous boar meat, which leaves Granville shocked and Thomas excited. Smiling, the Lord says he would never dare to hide anything. Our boy realizes that the Viscount is the one behind the king's order for the irrational boar hunt. We discover that the men's territories are close to each other, but only Colonel's lands prosper due to mithril mining. Different from 100 years ago when the White Dragon was in the Viscount's territory. For that reason, the two kingdoms had a bad relationship. Granville asks why the Viscount is at his house. In response, he says he came to report the result of the evaluation of his youngest daughter, who participated in the ceremony. Thinking, Alan says the girl is the same age as Mashu. Laughing, the man says that fortunately, the little one has no talent. Annoyed, Granville says that one day the man will have a child with talent and will have to fulfill the noble's duty just like him. Confused, our boy wonders if having talent is really that bad, while thinking that at least his siblings will be free from that since they are not nobles. More time passes and Alan, now 9 years old, completes 1 year working at the Baron's house, gradually obtaining the necessary equipment like the Death Spider's cloak. Additionally, after killing 10,000 goblins, he finally leveled up. Thus, on that day, he will fight against higher-ranked monsters. Without hesitation, the boy summons Hook, who a little while later finds a monster Levin had mentioned. An armored ant rank C. Hiding behind a tree, Alan thinks the creature must be about 3 meters tall and decides to summon his Tamas, which quickly surround the monster, then advance using their claws to attack. Watching, our boy thinks that apparently that method is not very effective. We see that the ant manages to annihilate a Tama with its pincers, making the protagonist change strategy and summon a Jiha, which quickly appears around the creature. The butterflies release their power on the big ant, which ends up falling asleep, making Alan happy that rank C monsters can also be poisoned. Even if the poison doesn't affect them effectively, he realizes he can also use that strategy on white deer. Climbing on the big ant, the boy decides to finish the job before it wakes up. And since his attack status is 438, using his dagger won't be a problem. However, even aiming at the creature's throat, its shell is too hard. The ant starts to wake up, and a protagonist thinks he won't let it escape no matter what. Sometime later, we discover that he managed to defeat the creature and receive 3,000 experience points, choosing to take the magic stones and leave quickly. However, he can't penetrate the monster's shell at all, deciding to abandon the stone mission and go look for orcs. Sometime later, Alan finds himself hiding, watching a monster that looks about 2 meters tall. We see that the creature is leaning against a tree trunk sleeping. Thinking, our boy says that his summons never get tired, but apparently, normal monsters need to sleep. Taking advantage of the chance, he summons his Tamas, which rush at the creature. The monster starts screaming, showing that the attack was effective. From afar, the protagonist is happy to see his plan working. Furious, the creature uses its weapon to attack the boy's summons, which fly far away. Surprised, the young man realizes that the monster defeated 3 Tamas at once, deciding then to summon another batch. The plan works, and we can see the monster spewing strawberry juice from its mouth. After defeating the orc, the boy receives 1,500 experience points. Approaching, he says that this will be his new farming target. Using his dagger, Alan manages to collect the magic stones, then wondering if he will need a bunch of those items in the future since he killed a rank C monster without using traps. However, since he was defeated by a 15-year-old student from the academy, he is still weak, besides the fact that former academy students like the Knight Commander and the Vice Commander must be much stronger than Mihi. We discover that in that world, academy graduates are overwhelmingly powerful people, representing less than 1% of the population. Alan then decides that his next goal is to kill 2 orcs at once. At the end of the day, we discover that he eliminated, besides the ant, 15 orcs. Returning home all happy, the boy thinks that now he will be an orc slayer because it gives much more experience points. Around mid-November, we see Cecil ordering him not to say anything rude in front of her teacher. We discover that the boy was allowed to attend class with the girl as a gift for his first anniversary as a servant. Saying that he has a question, he asks the teacher if he can tell him the necessary conditions to use magic, revealing that now he wants to use his high intelligence stat to learn something new. Cecil says that the boy doesn't even have a talent, so he doesn't need to know that. However, the teacher says he will explain. The man then says that obviously it's necessary to have a talent in order to use magic, leaving the boy frustrated. The teacher then states that Cecil, for example, still cannot cast spells. Confused, Alan asks how if the girl said she was a sorceress. Nervous, the girl asks for the teacher's crystal ball and proves that she can indeed use magic. The protagonist asks if he can try too, making the girl hesitant. Positioning his hands, he starts to strain, hoping something will happen. Nothing happens, and the man says that in this case, magic is impossible for the boy. In his mind, he wonders what the hell is the point of having so much intelligence if he can't use magic and can't win with a sword. December arrives, and we see Alan carrying shopping bags that Cecil asked for. A man thanks him one last time, revealing that the boy saved him when he was surrounded by monsters. We discover that it's been a year since the protagonist was officially authorized to hunt, which made him known around the city. Looking to the side, a situation catches his attention. Running, he asks Levin what is happening. Replying, the man says that Madagalu appeared near the south gate. Alan asks if the group is going to face the creature, but one of the girls in the trio says definitely not, because only the most powerful person in the territory, in this case the commander of the knights, would have a chance. Since the man and the vice commander are absent, they are going to help evacuate people. Thinking, our boy says that this is not good at all since most adventurers don't have talent and won't fight. Determined, he says that helping those in trouble is the duty of the hunter of the Granville family, so he is going to challenge the rank B monster. Running, he easily leaves the trio behind. At the south gate, we see people running, including the injured. A guard orders the gates to be closed and not to let the monster in. Another man begs to wait because his carriage is still outside. However, the huge monster has already arrived and is now devouring one of the horses tied to the vehicle. The creature is enormous and seems to have human-like teeth. Approaching, Alan says that it must be 4 meters tall or more. In the carriage, we see that a woman and her child are about to be attacked. The protagonist decides to do something, unlike the guards who remain frozen. Opening his storage, he grabs an iron ball, and with all of his strength, throws the object toward Madagalu, hitting the creature straight in the eye. Running in another direction, the boy thinks that the hit should be enough to attract the monster. Being bold, he calls his opponent a stupid dog while ordering it to attack him. Worried, Levin and a guard ask the boy to stop doing that. Suddenly, the bizarre creature charges at the protagonist, who decides to speed up since his mana is not yet fully recovered. Madagalu tries to attack him with its huge paws, but Alan, even falling to the ground from the impact, manages to dodge. The adventurer trio, desperate, asks the boy to get up quickly. Face to face with the monster, our boy wonders why it's not coming after him. The creature places its paw on the ground and starts laughing, showing that it was just having fun. Shocked, the protagonist thinks that his father has the worst naming skills since he named Mashu based on this monster. Standing still, he wonders if this is a turn-based battle or something else, then promising that he will make Madagalu regret not attacking him. Alan decides to summon his creatures, thinking that his agility and endurance must be increased so that he can dodge the attacks. Perplexed, Levin wonders how the boy could use himself as bait. Meanwhile, the monster chases him through the forest. Happy to have lured the enemy away from the city, the protagonist orders Aja to put it to sleep. However, his summons are quickly annihilated. While continuing to run, he decides to try again. Sometime later, we discover that Alan lost sight of Madagalu. In shock, he wonders how all his debuffs didn't work, deciding to get more XP to be able to take revenge later, now that the monster is far from the city. However, something ends up catching his attention. We see that Madagalu is actually behind him, while in front of him stands an orc. 3 days pass, and a guard sees someone approaching. It's Alan, all battered, and as he gets closer, the boy collapses on the ground. Worried, the guard yells, asking for someone to call a doctor. When the boy wakes up, he finds himself face to face with Cecil, who asks how he's feeling after sleeping for 2 straight days. Then she says that, as his lady, it's only natural for her to be worried. Thomas approaches and says he's glad Alan is okay, while the butler informs him that the Baron would like to see him. In Granville's office, the man asks what our boy was thinking. Apologizing, Alan says he only managed to escape and that he's sorry for acting on his own. To his surprise, the Knight Commander appears and says he is very grateful for Alan fulfilling a duty that was supposed to be his. The Baron also says that Alan doesn't need to apologize for saving the city, and his reward will be 20 gold coins. With shining eyes, Alan can only think about how he needs to go to the weapon shop. Granville then says that next time he shouldn't go so far. Agreeing, the protagonist promises he'll be more careful. Thus, the next day, he is hunting another monster, but this time with a very sharp mithril sword that costs 25 gold coins. Alan also discovered that the memories of a previously summoned beast are passed on to the most recently summoned beast, and that summons walk alongside the summoner, so they store all information gained through effort. Additionally, the giant rank B bird and the fierce goblins, and the rank C monsters that an adventurer cannot handle alone. Together with the Madagalu, they make the creatures of that world far too strong. Spring has arrived and Mihi has returned home, granting Alan his rematch as promised. Thinking, our boy says that even though his level is higher, his opponent is still 100 times faster than him. The other family members watch the duel excitedly, as the two boys engage in a sword battle. Confused, Cecil wonders if her servant is weaker than the last time. After a while, we see that the protagonist loses again, even though he is bigger. Everyone praises Mihi, who thanks them, stating that his opponent has also improved a lot. Shaking the boy's hand, our protagonist says that even so, he still doesn't compare to Mihi's strength. During dinner, the eldest son finds out that the protagonist fought against the Madagalu and was chased for 3 days. Looking at the boy, Mihi says that must have been very dangerous. Then Thomas asks if Alan can defeat the creature, but Cecil says absolutely not. Granville then tells Mihi to keep getting stronger. Suddenly, guards burst in, warning that the white dragon has awakened. Surprised, our boy wonders how that's possible if the beast has been asleep for 100 years. One of the men then says that the Adventurer Guild reported seeing the creature flying toward Calmal's territory. Shocked, Granville asks for an investigation to be conducted in all mithril mines. The Knight Commander interrupts, stating that the mountain slopes are full of powerful monsters, so the task will take months. Excited, Thomas says he feels that history is about to change, while Mihi says his return next year will be very fun. Approaching, the boy's mother says it really will be. The commander then says there's still a chance the white dragon might come back, so the story must remain secret. Thinking to himself, Alan says that he's probably about to lose the chance to hunt beasts alone. In the first week of July, our boy celebrates having had a very productive day. Checking some things, he concludes that it will take another 2 years to level up his summoning skill. However, his interest now is to figure out what the companionship skill is about. When he activates it, something happens that leaves the boy wide-eyed. We see that now he can see through Hook's eyes, so the skill works for both of them. Additionally, hearing is also shared. It's as if he's flying around himself. Combined with the Hawk Eye skill, Alan can now see miles ahead. He also discovers that he can give commands while doing this. The boy concludes that it's like controlling multiple characters at the same time with no limit to the quantity. Thus, since each summon requires 200 points to use the skill, with 1,200 points he can control 6 summons. He then decides that it's time to check out new rank D animals since he has 10,000 magic stones. Upon seeing what the new creatures are, the protagonist is in complete shock, because except for Jabagada, all of them have intelligence above 100, which means he can control them remotely and use the companionship skill. His only frustration is not being able to do this with Tama. Alan chooses to use summons to hunt beasts immediately, quickly finding another giant ant. Using his spider, he orders it to shoot its web, while the bear finishes the job. Successfully, he defeats the monster with just a few strikes, satisfied that he can now hunt armored ants. His remote summoning team also celebrates. We discover that Horu and Hook are in charge of reconnaissance, and with Haremi's skill, the entire team can dodge faster. And with the bears handling offense and defense, he no longer needs to worry about rank C beasts. Furthermore, the companionship skill does not deactivate while the boy sleeps, meaning farming is now always possible. As he leaves, he asks his summons not to approach strangers and not to fight back even if they are attacked. While thinking, the boy feels that his strength has increased a lot. Remembering that he can view things from the air, the protagonist has a very interesting idea. We return to see the village of Karina, where one of Alan's birds watches a boy and a girl training. It's Krina and Dogora. The young swordswoman charges at the axe user with everything she's got. Then it's Mashu's turn to practice. Happy, the protagonist's brother stands in front of the pair. Meanwhile, Rodan is working on the farm. Looking up, the man says the flying bird looks suspicious. We see Alan's mother fixing Mira's hair, who can't sit still. With the hairstyle finished, the little girl thanks Teresa. Both hear a strange noise and find a gold coin at the door. Rodan finishes his work and heads home. We discover that our boy has been visiting his family every day thanks to the companionship skill. October arrives, which is when he turns 10 years old and completes 2 years working at the Baron's house. Wiping his mouth, Granville comments that the investigation has lasted half a year and asks how the situation at the mines is. The Knight Commander then says that the place is full of magical beasts, which have also gathered around the Mithril refinery, so it should take 3 years to resolve the situation. Hearing this leaves the Baron and his wife worried. The man then asks the commander to do everything possible to shorten the time. We also discover that because of the Viscount's rush to exploit the mines, they ended up angering the dragon. Hearing everything, Alan feels relieved that he didn't use his skill to explore the creature, as it's still too soon to face a rank A. Granbiel then says that when Calmil can no longer mine, he'll be out of options, so their team must keep an eye on him, revealing that the punishment from the Night Order has just begun. Thankfully, Alan says he has prepared for this. Thus, when he turns 12, he will leave that place and start his own adventurer guild. Meanwhile, he'll have to keep praying the knights don't take away his experience. Behind the mountain is the home of the armored ants. At the base of the White Dragon's mountain is the territory of the goblins and orcs. The Goblin King rules over the goblins, and the Orc King rules over the orcs, and the Ant Queen rules over the ants. To start, in a few days, the goblin village will be wiped out. The goblins and orcs that were hunted were born in villages like that. Upon noticing the existence of baby goblins, the protagonist starts to hesitate a little. However, he notices the human skeletons on the ground. Apparently, the goblins had eaten the humans and stolen their weapons. Normally, he hesitated when he had to remove an XP source, but at that moment, he was determined to kill them all without leaving a single one behind. A fish is thrown in front of the animals. The spider had great strength, while the bear had high endurance. That's why the warrior decides to send the bears into battle first. The fight begins, and the animals show all their strength and cruelty. The goblins try to defend themselves as best they can, trying to lure the enemies elsewhere. Soon after, the bears get confused in battle, not knowing what to do. From the top of a structure, a creature prepares its bow and arrow aimed at the opponents. However, the spider was already prepared and manages to use its webs on the goblin. Noticing that the goblins were capable of ranged attacks, the warrior sent the spider to handle it. With the defeat of one of the goblins, the Let's Res gauge increased to 200. Nervous, the boy watched his enemies approaching. More and more furious, the goblins seemed ready to take down anyone who stood in their way. An abundance of creatures began gathering, wielding their weapons. Upon counting around 200 or 300 enemies, he realized he should join the fight. Shortly after, the scanning was completed. Thus, he seemed extremely confident in sending his bears to defeat the opponents. Noticing the movement, some goblin warriors tried to defend themselves and counterattack. However, the bears were too powerful, and some enemies were already fleeing out of fear. Like reading from a book in his hands, the boy announces that he had already mobilized his troops to prevent any kind of escape. Many bears surrounded the area, blocking the creatures from leaving. The fight became more and more intense, with brutal and powerful blows. Confident, the boy seemed certain that he would win the battle. Suddenly, a thunderous scream could be heard from the depths. A large shadow appeared behind the troops. It was the powerful rank C Goblin King, who didn't look very happy with the situation. With a smile on his face, the boy realized that the boss had appeared. Those warriors had already defeated 1,000 rank C beasts, so this wouldn't be difficult. The Goblin King began to get nervous and let out a growl. Shortly after, the strong creature was defeated, granting a bonus of 4,200 experience. Upon realizing another victory, the boy asked the bears to gather all the goblins in one place. Meanwhile, he started approaching the bodies scattered on the ground. His goal was to try to collect all the magic stones. In the end, the pile of bodies kept getting bigger. With one hand, he searched for the torch in his book. Realizing that his inventory didn't automatically extinguish fire, he showed a small smile. The boy pointed the torch at the bonfire, causing the fire to burn the bodies. At that moment, he declared that the mission in the goblin village was complete. Kneeling on the ground, he offered condolences to the spirits, wishing that the remains would be delivered to the next knights. That time, they had earned 48,800 experience by defeating 223 goblins. In the following months, the protagonist was determined to continue conquering goblin villages, leveling up to catch up to Madagalu. In March, she came across a young man carrying some bags. With a smile on her face, she seemed happy about graduating from the academy, saying that the family could reunite again. The man held the girl's hands while the boy carried the luggage. Quietly, he reflected that something was very strange about his colleague's expression. The girl at his side had already turned 10 years old. Cecil seemed confused by the man's behavior. Suddenly, he called out to Alan. With a mysterious look, he stated that the two would fight seriously. Upon hearing that, the boy wasn't confused since he already expected to challenge the young man. However, he still noticed something different about him that year. In the end, his daughter stated that she would fight with all her strength. Shortly after, the whole family was gathered. The children talked about Mihi and how he seemed strange. Others just watched with some apprehension without saying a word. After finishing the support check, Alan realized which was his best individual stat for battle. With his summoning skill, the bears and spiders were his best options. The protagonist was fully determined to win the battle this time. However, his expression changed upon hearing his name. Mihi showed his swordsmanship skill while expressing his gratitude for something. Without wasting time, the protagonist gripped his sword firmly, waiting for the first attack. Raising one hand, he announced the start of the fight. The boy moved his legs quickly, swinging his sword at his opponent. His agility reached 1,438, almost double compared to the previous year. This time, he was determined to defeat him at all costs. When launching an attack with his weapon, Mihi managed to block it. Frustrated, the protagonist realized that the opponent was still very strong. Even so, he wasn't going to give up the battle and did everything he could to maintain his balance. Wielding his sword, he showed he was ready for a new attack. Alan thought that due to his agility, he was much faster. Again, he tried to land new blows using all his skill. Meanwhile, the children noticed that Mihi seemed to be at a disadvantage. But the old man reassured them, informing them that the young man was not losing. With determination on his face, he dodged all the attacks. Sweat dripped down Alan's face as he used all his attributes. Apparently, his opponent was able to read his movements, which is why he blocked everything. At that moment, he realized the situation wasn't looking good. The two continued fighting the powerful and intense strikes. Suddenly, Mihi managed to disarm his opponent, throwing his sword far away. Both were shocked when they heard the order to stop the fight right then. Disappointed, the protagonist tried to figure out the reason that led him to lose again. While a tear runs down his face, he thanks the compliments from the young master. Confused, Alan notices that the boy walks straight past him. At that moment, he realizes that there would be no handshake this time. The man informs that the intense 3 years of training made Mihi much stronger. With a smile on his face, he thanks the compliments coming from his father. Meanwhile, Alan reflected on the promise to fight the boy. Cecil shows that she was very happy with the warrior's progress, even being inferior to Mihi Oni-sama. The three talk about the possibility of the boy becoming a disciple to learn the sword style. Suddenly, the young man calls Cecil and Thomas, wishing to tell them something. Curious, the two turn their bodies towards their older brother. The young master announces that he could not return home due to a noble obligation for the next 3 years. His siblings are completely shocked upon receiving that information. With a small smile, the warrior apologizes for the inconvenience. Soon after, he starts being bombarded with questions from Thomas and Cecil. The girl's face completely changes when she realizes that the obligation would start the next day. Quickly, she turns her gaze towards her father, but the man remains silent beside his wife. At that moment, the girl realizes that her brother would really be leaving. Cecil shows that she would really like to stay with him longer. Holding his sister's hands, Mihi states that he would send letters and return after 3 years. However, tears begin to fall from the girl's face as she realizes how much time she would be away from her brother. From afar, Alan observed the whole family scene. To him, it seemed like the same situation as turning 15 in high school and going to apprentice school. With an evil smile, a man reveals that he feels sorry for Baron Graybeal, saying that 2 out of the 3 children had talent. The young master's father seems irritated with this noble obligation. Since that moment, the Baron had been mentally prepared. Even so, Alan seemed to feel something very suspicious. The sun rises in the distance, illuminating around the mansion. Lined up, the servants await new instructions. The boy questions Rickle about the noble obligation. But even after working for 12 years for the Baron, the employee had no knowledge of that. Shortly after, Mihi descends the stairs step by step. With wide eyes, the protagonist notices the armor he was wearing. Thomas asks Cecil to say goodbye to her older brother. Cautiously, the girl approaches her family member. Tears begin to stream down her face as she says that she would anxiously await his return. With a warm hug, he assures that they would see each other soon. His parents show that they were very proud of the Graybill family's talent. One of the servants wishes a safe journey to the young master. Suddenly, Alan begins to sense a kind of approach. Mihi hugs the boy, who seems not to understand the situation. Lowering his body, he whispers in his ear, asking the protagonist to take good care of Cecil. Even nervous, he affirms that he understood the orders received. As he watches his departure, he starts to reflect that the warriors seem to be trembling a little. With a smile on his face, he states that he should leave to fulfill his obligation for the family. Everyone waves to the young master, while Cecil says that they would be waiting for him. Alan thinks that after 3 years, it was time to leave and Cecil would go to the academy. As long as he is a servant, he would still be devoted to protecting her in every way. May arrived and 2 months had passed since Mihi left. In October of the previous year, Alan began fighting against the Goblin Village with only a few creatures remaining on the White Dragon Mountain. After conquering the Goblin Village, his level had increased to 35. The Order of the Knights would arrive in the morning, so the warrior had to hurry. As expected, he didn't know how many enemies might be in the place, only investigating superficially. Similar to the strategy in the Goblin Village, he had a team of summons for an ambush in the rear. That was the pincer movement tactic to destroy the enemy. This time, Braun would support with ranged attacks with his special protection talent. Shortly after, he gathers his troops and asks them to aim at the Orc village. The spiders and bears begin to approach the narrow gate. The sentinels notice the suspicious movement and start getting irritated. Wielding their weapons, they were determined to protect the fortress with all their strength. Without wasting time, the attack begins and the bears aim directly at the guards' necks. Accustomed to fighting one-on-one, the bears were indeed a very powerful weapon. Noticing the attack, arrows begin to be launched. At that moment, Alan calls for Braun's protection. With a gigantic shield, the knight protects his master. Despite everything, the protagonist notices that there were many enemies. Shortly after, his bear is hit by arrows. Even so, they don't seem to give up on the battle and continue the attacks. Unable to read the current HP of the summons, Alan knew that the bears would fail if they kept ignoring their injuries. Suddenly, he tries a new approach by using his insects. The spiders start to move upon hearing the order to kill the archers. With a leap, the arachnids quickly approach. Without realizing it, the enemies receive a powerful attack from the spiders. At that moment, Alan realizes that he should increase the number of spiders to fight the orcs. With determination, he gives the order to keep marching forward. His troops advance into the fortress, leaving all the destruction behind. One of the creatures notices the approach of that dangerous threat and rings a bell, warning its companions. As he walks, Alan seems to reflect on everything ahead. He didn't want it, but there could be more than 200 orcs in the place. Therefore, he seemed excited to realize there was a chance to gain more XP. His next order is given, asking for all the bears to enter the battle. The rear ambush team should also launch an attack. Bears and orcs start fighting with massive attacks against each other. So far, everything was going well, but Alan notices that it was taking longer than the goblins. After defeating about 100 of them, he didn't understand why the king had not appeared yet. Suddenly, something in the middle of the smoke starts to catch the protagonist's attention. His expression completely changes when he realizes what it was. Desperate, he immediately calls for Bron's protection. Upon hearing the command, the knight raises his shield to the master. Frightened, he starts to realize what was happening before his eyes. That was magical power being used against his warriors. Powerful orcs had arrived, but apparently there was more than one boss. With the staff in its hands, the creature seemed to carry immense power. At that moment, Alan had to find a way to deal with the enemy's magical power. Smiling, he realizes that the first magic attack he saw in his life came from beasts. Birds began flying over the battlefield. Alan was with his soldiers, protected by 2 shields. Confused, he tried to analyze the situation against the opponent. Suddenly, the enemy starts moving its staff, casting something into the sky. The protagonist realizes that he is being attacked by a fireball and calls for Bron's protection. Quickly, the spell is launched against him. The shield was protecting against the attack, but even so, everything was very hot. Alan becomes more nervous as he notices 3 new fireballs coming his way. With their staffs, the orcs began to unleash magical power. Fireballs were launched in all directions, hitting their opponents. Opening his book, Alan realizes that the boss was capable of attacking from behind where Bron wasn't covering. Shortly after, he holds his spear in his hands. With determination, he throws the weapon at the opponent, calling it to the fight. At that moment, a magic orc is defeated, earning 2,000 experience. Smiling, the protagonist realizes that the magic orcs were only rank C. With only 2 iron balls remaining, he couldn't miss his attacks. Meanwhile, his enemies had vanished from sight. Confused, Alan seems not to understand what was happening. Suddenly, a fireball hits bears and spiders. The boy realizes that the components were out of his attack range and his battle strength was reduced. In the middle of the battlefield, numerous orc warriors appear. Nervous, the protagonist realizes that there were hundreds of them. Despite everything, he wouldn't give up on his goals and was ready for a fiercer battle. Moreover, he still had magic stones to summon another 20,000 bears. More than that, he also had 100 magic balls made from rank D beasts. Until his magical power is exhausted, those warriors would be the defensive wall. Shortly after, the bears start doing everything to protect Alan from the attacks. Meanwhile, a figure begins approaching the gate. From afar, a creature screams with great anger in its voice. Intrigued, he starts observing where that voice was coming from. A giant orc was approaching with its weapon in hand. Still protected by Bron, the boy notices the arrival of the powerful orc king. That opponent was really strong, and his appearance could scare anyone. Alan realizes that it was on the same level as the Madagalu. That gigantic beast, the Orc King, was a rank B. The bear was a completely small animal compared to it, which was about 4 meters tall. Increasingly enraged, the monster starts screaming desperately for Gumo. Wasting no time, he charges forward with his sword, destroying everything around him. Alan grows increasingly frightened by the threat he must face. Flipping through his book, he decides to look for a powerful enough strike to finish the enemy. Using his cards, he decides to summon an enhancement for one of his creations. Meanwhile, his bears are being completely destroyed. Alan had lost his army faster than the summoning speed of the animals for reinforcements. Moreover, the Orc King didn't seem determined to wipe everyone out. Realizing he would be the next target of the fireball, he calls for Bron's protection. The knight answers his call and manages to arrive in time. But even so, Bron is defeated by the intense heat of the flames. Suddenly, something powerful starts coming his way. With nowhere to run, he tries to use the bears as a means of protection. An explosion occurs on the spot, sending debris flying in all directions. Alan's body is thrown far away. Meanwhile, the Orc King continues wiping out every bear he sees in front of him. With the special skill Mamataru, Fruit of Life, his recovery is 1000 HP. Opening his eyes, he realizes the horrifying scene in front of him. Confused, he doesn't know if he can continue fighting until the end. He wasn't sure if he could dodge magical attacks from that position. He tries to think of some way to regain the initiative against the enemy. His eyes reveal all of his anger as thoughts flood his mind. At that moment, he realizes that maybe the best option would be to retreat. Suddenly, he notices the presence of a man in front of him. Confused, he doesn't understand what is happening. The warrior continues observing the protagonist's difficult battle. The Knight Commander was supposed to arrive only tomorrow, but seeing the smoke, he came to check. Kneeling, Alan explains that he was trying to invade the orc village and considers the possibility of fleeing. Calmly, the old warrior starts analyzing the situation. Besides everything, the young man realizes that the summoned beasts have been exposed. They shouldn't be mixed with magical beasts, so they should retreat. Shortly after, the bears disappear completely from the battlefield. With his sword drawn, the commander decides to fight the Orc King. Alan notices that the man had completely ignored the summoned beasts. More than that, he didn't even flinch in front of the king, being able to defeat even Madagalu alone. The commander announces that he will defeat the Orc King alone, and the vice captain, REBORN, will take care of the rest. Alan starts observing the man, realizing that it had been a long time since he last saw him. Originally, the protagonist tried to secretly monopolize the XP, but this was the perfect chance to watch the two show their true power. The commander was a skilled swordsman, while the vice captain was a powerful lancer. On the battlefield, the opponents exchanged intense stares. Worried, the young man reflected on the dangers of standing in front of the Orc King, who was a very fast monster. Wasting no time, the commander continues advancing to meet his enemy. The creature screams with its thunderous voice, showing it had no fear at all. With its gigantic weapon, it launches the first strike. But the commander was already prepared for that move and defends himself with all his strength. The ground around him starts to sink, but the man holds his position. Alan seems impressed with what is happening before his eyes. On the other hand, the vice captain was already used to scenes like that. The Knight Commander had a fighting style that overwhelmed his opponent. Therefore, his nickname was Xenoph, the Battle Demon. Standing still, the two continue staring more and more intensely. Their eyes reveal the desire to start the battle again. At that moment, Alan realizes that the Orc King was truly crazy and enraged. The fighters raise their weapons, pointing them at each other. With skill, the monster launches a powerful strike, but isn't accurate. Xenoph doesn't seem worried about that situation, while the orc's veins bulge across his body. Suddenly, he starts to show all his swordsmanship skills. The protagonist realizes that the Knight Commander didn't seem inferior to that gigantic opponent. Shortly after, the vice captain starts moving across the battlefield. With a spear on his shoulder, he was determined to defeat all the other enemies. Quickly, the combatants launched fireballs into the air. Understanding the situation, the fighter realizes that the cause of the fire was the magic orc. Wasting no more time, he jumps toward his enemies. Landing in the middle of them, he starts positioning himself for the fight. Meanwhile, Alan watches the entire scene with extreme attention. The opponents begin advancing with their weapons drawn, but the vice captain was much more agile and skilled, managing to block the attacks. Suddenly, the magic orc is completely struck, with no chance to defend itself. Nervous, the protagonist seems truly impressed by what he sees. That man seemed afraid of nothing even when fireballs came his way. Wasting no time, he lowers his body and moves his spear with extreme precision. Destruction begins to spread across the battlefield, with fire scattered everywhere. Irritated, the orcs seem unwilling to lose that fight so easily. But the warrior doesn't let them recover and attacks everything that appears in front of him. Alan notices that the man was defeating the orcs as if they were nothing. Suddenly, he looks again at the Knight Commander fighting against the Orc King. Smoke was spreading everywhere as the man made a magnificent leap toward the giant monster. With a powerful strike, he is able to split the creature's body into two parts. The scene becomes increasingly grim, with remains scattered all around. The Knight Commander seems unfazed by anything. To the boy, the Orc King is nothing more than a fly in front of that warrior. Even the vice captain is very strong, using a move that seems to be the same as Karina's extra skill. At that moment, the boy starts wondering why he himself doesn't have the same skill related to his talent. However, the Knight Commander didn't even need extra skills to defeat the Orc King. After finishing his fight, the man asked the boy to stay and help since the knights would only arrive after nightfall. Despite everything, something still lingered in the young warrior's mind. Curious, he asks if he could take the magic stones from the bodies. Receiving a yes as an answer, the boy wastes no time and starts scavenging the orcs. Meanwhile, the vice captain seems suspicious of that scene. Now the camp should be burned so that the monsters wouldn't return. But the two didn't need to worry about that, since the knights would take care of the rest tomorrow. As it was getting late, they would rest for a bit, and tomorrow the commander would have a conversation with the baron. At the camp, the men gathered wood to make a bonfire. Sitting on a log, the boy enjoyed a piece of meat. Meanwhile, he told the warrior that he had attacked the goblin village alone, exterminating more than 50 of them. The commander seems curious about that number being much higher than he had thought. For a moment, the boy stops enjoying the meal. He explains that 4 years ago, an abundance of albaharon feathers was found in the place where the secret sword was discovered. The Karina village exceeded the wild boar hunting target by 10 each year, and as a reward, Alan was accepted as a servant of the Greybeard family. Suddenly, outside the city, many bodies of demonic beasts appeared, from which the magic stones had been removed. More recently, they found bodies of many goblins who had lost their magic stones as well as traces of a burned village. Therefore, the man believed that the boy was hunting alone, capable of defeating a rank C monster. At that moment, the protagonist realizes that he had been discovered. As the assessment showed that the boy had no talent, the commander decided to question the officers. At that time, there was a blinding light coming from a strange boy with black hair and eyes. They couldn't read it clearly, so they had to say no talent due to his low stats. Zionov claims to believe that Alan might have his own talent, the ability to fight alongside animals. But the boy remains silent, unable to confess that he received special powers from the creator of that world. Meanwhile, the commander resumes enjoying a piece of his meat. In any case, it was just the result of his small investigation. Alan is completely distraught upon hearing that the Baron already knew about his talent. Probably he must have noticed it since discovering the boy's fondness for hunting. Reflective, he thinks that this might be the reason he was granted 2 days of hunting, something quite generous for a child like him. However, the Knight Commander could not answer all the protagonist's questions. The man would keep today's events a secret from the Baron, but the boy would need to provide a report on the beast hunts. For him, they both had the same goals, and that was a great proposal. With a bit of guilt in his eyes, the boy accepts the agreement with the goal of gaining experience. Suddenly, a soldier informs that the bathwater is ready. Showing his gratitude for saving his life, the boy offers to wash the commander's back. A short time later, he opens the curtain holding a basin in his hands. However, he is shocked by the scene he witnesses. The commander's back had extensive wounds. Confused, Alan didn't seem to understand how the man managed to survive with those injuries. The boy had brought medicine for the commander and would take care of the situation. Even so, the man claimed that everything was fine. After wetting a cloth, the boy begins washing the fighter's back. While continuing his tasks, Alan thinks that next time he would like to defeat an orc king by himself. Startled, he receives a question from the commander asking if he felt happy when hunting. Reflecting for a moment, the protagonist seems confused, realizing that maybe the man was able to read his thoughts. With a smile on his face, he says that it's really fun to keep practicing and getting stronger. 5 years ago, the commander had a wound on his face, which was now completely healed. While the boy cleaned his back, the warrior showed a small smile. The soldiers guarded the area, ready for any kind of threat. Alan was sleeping deeply next to the vice captain. After one day, they returned to the mansion and reported the destruction of all bases occupied by monsters. Cecil ran toward Alan as she noticed his return. Irritated, she said that she was very worried about him. Meanwhile, the girl's father watched the boy carefully. Even though he had gone out without permission, the young man was not being scolded, receiving only smiling expressions. 2 weeks after being saved by the knights during the second orc subjugation, the fight spreads across the area with an extremely angry orc king being attacked by several bears. Suddenly, it receives a fatal blow and falls backward, with no chance to defend itself. At that moment, Alan was able to defeat the creature, gaining 25,000 experience. From the top of a tree, he seemed safe with his movements. At first, he let 40 bears attack from all sides, reducing the number of enemies and prioritizing hitting the magic orcs. He continued summoning additional bears to compensate for the ones defeated, leaving the king's power to be exhausted. The experience gained in the orc village was 7 times more than in the goblin village. Celebrating, Alan seemed extremely happy with his victory. After the hard work, it was time to collect some magic stones. That time, the boy had used more than 120 rank D magic stones and should try to use fewer next time. October arrived and the protagonist turned 11 years old. Since May, he had destroyed 20 orc villages and always reported everything to the Knight Commander as promised. The time required for mithril mining was reduced from 3 to 2 years. At that pace, he would be able to eliminate all the orcs and then next year would hunt the armored ants. After turning 12, he would start his life as an adventurer. Lost in his thoughts, he gets tapped by his companion, saying that some people had arrived. The person in front of him was a royal messenger, who entered the mansion calmly. Wearing clothes that covered his entire body, he thanked them for the welcome. But Alan didn't like the look of that man, who was responsible for increasing taxes. The patriarch of the Graybeard family receives the messenger, questioning the reason for the visit. With his hands together, he states that the Baron has always been loyal to the royal family, following the king's orders. For the man, being in good standing with the king is a great privilege. Alan thinks how strange the conversation was, something too calm. The messenger states that he has something for the Baron to receive personally. One of his subordinates hands over a box with a letter inside. That piece of paper was from his son, Mihi. At that moment, the man's expression changes and he needs to be restrained by his wife. Cecil doesn't seem to care, being teased by Thomas. Still, the girl tries to hide the happiness on her face upon hearing about her brother after a year and a half. Wasting no time, the Baron decides to open the letter. Nervous, he seems unable to believe what he is reading. The messenger states that he received that letter about 3 months ago. Meanwhile, the children seem increasingly worried. Suddenly, his wife asks to read what was written. Placing a hand on her face, she seems unable to believe any of what was written. Mihi did his best for the noble obligation and ended up passing away. Everyone is extremely shocked upon hearing those words from the messenger. Irritated, the Baron raises his voice and claims that the man was completely mistaken about those facts. Mihi had just graduated from the academy, and that dangerous place was not suitable for a noble from a small family. With a piercing gaze, the messenger questions if those words were being directed at the royal family. Speechless, the man seems not to know what to do in that situation. His wife cried uncontrollably, remembering her beloved son. One of her subordinates tries to help her, noticing all the nervousness present in her body. The money for the funeral would be discussed later during other visits. Wasting no time, the man closes the doors and leaves, leaving the family completely shattered. Remembering Mihi's words before his departure, Alan realizes that the warrior might have foreseen what would happen to him. Meanwhile, Cecil seems confused and unable to understand what was written in the letter. Finally, her father asks everyone to leave, including Thomas. Suspicious, Alan doesn't understand the reason for leaving only Cecil in the room. The doors close quickly, leaving father and daughter inside. Meanwhile, the hours pass and the servants continue their chores, even devastated by the news. With a broom in his hands, the boy reflects that the entire family was in shock after reading that letter. Suddenly, the boy hears shouting coming from inside the room. Cecil seemed extremely angry about her older brother's death, hating the so-called noble obligation. Despite everything, her father tries to calm her, but the girl doesn't want to hear any nonsense and runs away. Her eyes were full of tears, and her expression was lost. Cecil runs up the stairs, leaving her father talking alone. Alan thinks that probably the girl should follow the same steps as her brother in the future. To him, the death of a 15-year-old boy made no sense. The Baron tries to hold back his tears, but his sad expression is clear to everyone around. Suddenly, Alan begins to remember the scenes from earlier. In the end, he understands that this was the duty of all nobles and nothing could be done. Alongside a butler, the boy goes to Cecil's room. A servant knocks on the door, informing the girl that her dinner is ready. At that moment, the Baron says that the best thing to do is let Cecil rest. Alone, Alan reflects that Thomas would become the new heir of the Greybeard family. Meanwhile, Cecil cries uncontrollably in her bed. The next day, the servants prepare breakfast. Rumors said that the Greybeard family tended to have short lives since the Baron's parents and his brother died very early. Remembering the young master Mihi, the man starts feeling emotional. Despite the boy being born into a noble family, that situation was still very cruel. Suddenly, a servant enters the dining room, startling everyone by speaking about an emergency. One of the maids reported that the young lady was no longer in her room. Everyone begins a frantic search for the girl, who had completely disappeared. Alan notices that the window of her room was open, and maybe she could have escaped through there. Determined, he calls the butler to inform him of his findings. Finally, he asks to leave the mansion and search for Cecil outside. Wasting no time, he opens his book and starts summoning birds to search for the girl. If she had escaped through the main door, she would have been seen, so he calculates that she must have fled through the back. His powerful birds begin to scour the entire village. Tired, Cecil had walked too much through the city and couldn't stay on her feet anymore. Her feet were sore, and she decides to rest a bit. Holding a butterfly in her hands, the child starts remembering her older brother. Covering her face, she says she misses Mihi a lot, letting her tears fall. Suddenly, she notices someone familiar approaching. But Alan wasn't there to convince Cecil to return home, since his duty was to accompany the lady. In the end, he was Cecil's most loyal servant and was willing to agree with her wishes. The girl asks if the boy was trying to force her to return, but he stays silent. Annoyed, she says that Alan didn't need to worry about her. Suddenly, her stomach makes a very loud noise. Crossing her arms, Cecil says she hasn't eaten anything since last night. Shortly after, the protagonist holds an item in his hands. In front of the girl, he sets up a feast and asks her to eat immediately. Curious, she doesn't seem to understand where those items came from. Cecil picks up the food in her hands and starts inspecting it. Soon after, the girl is already enjoying all those delicacies. While she eats, the two remain silent, observing the landscape. Suddenly, tears begin to well up again. Embarrassed, she covers her face while whispering about her brother. Alan says that Mihi was extremely strong since he had never managed to defeat him. Hearing that, Cecil feels even sadder, remembering her brother's fate. Finally, she simply says that she should die too, just like Mihi. The protagonist tries to understand if the girl already knew something. In addition to learning that the kingdom had never been in conflict with its neighbors, he knew it would not be military conscription. To begin with, he would have to find a way to persuade Cecil. With determination, he asks if the lady was willing to leave that city with him. Just go on a trip to forget all the negative things using money the boy had saved. Confused, Cecil seems not to understand how that situation would be possible. But for now, she should return home and wait for Alan's 12th birthday, when he would become an adventurer. However, the girl informs him that it would be impossible since she was already in the academy. Suddenly, her expression changes completely upon realizing his plans. Alan was talking about the right to choose how one should live. However, Cecil had no idea what kind of life she really wanted to live. Sitting, she looked at the small butterfly in her hands. Meanwhile, when the protagonist's birds watched the two from afar, Her gaze completely changes as she realizes in that instant what kind of life she wanted to live. Determined, she tells Alan that the two of them could go back home. Finally, she puts the butterfly in her hair while saying she's tired of walking. The two set off with the protagonist carrying Cecil on his back. Resting her face on her friend's back, she shows all her gratitude. Shortly after, they arrive at the Graybeetle family mansion. Her father starts approaching upon realizing that his daughter had returned. Cecil seems nervous about the reaction the Baron was about to show, but she is surprised to receive a warm hug. The girl begins to cry, saying that she caused trouble for everyone. However, her parents were only worried about the safety of their daughter, who was suffering too much. With a smile on his face, Alan realizes that he did something good. In the end, the Baron asks Cecil not to worry about anything for now. The mithril mining had started, and once recognized by the royal family, the noble obligation would also be dismissed. At that moment, the protagonist realizes the reason for promoting the mining. Feeling guilty, Alan thinks that if he had started cooperating with the knights earlier, perhaps Mihi could still be alive. Meanwhile, he continues to watch the family from afar. Cecil Graybeetle states that she will fulfill her noble obligation, following the same path her brother took. With determination in her eyes, the child shows that she is not willing to run away. Upon hearing her words, everyone falls silent. After half a year since the funeral of young Master Mihi, the Graybeetle family was returning to normal. The Orc garrison was destroyed by the knights, gaining full control of the mithril mines. After the summer, mining would begin and the Baron could rest for now. Now it was simply a matter of keeping an eye on the Calmal family, which had lost its mining rights. The Knight Commander received the order to be cautious at all times. In March, Alan starts climbing a very steep mountain. Even though Cecil really wanted to accompany him on the hunt, he realizes that he was smart not to allow it. Everyone knows that the girl wanted to get stronger, but she needed permission from the Baron to do anything. Suddenly, the young man notices something strange in front of him. Apparently, the protagonist had arrived at the right place. Now he would face another obstacle in mining. His next target would be the rank C magical beast, the armored ant. There were possibly 1,000 inside that cave, and a rank B queen ant had produced them all. This time, he had less information than usual and couldn't use aerial scouting in that battle. The entrance size was big enough for one of those ants. It was really narrow to go one at a time, designed that way on purpose. Therefore, Alan would try to reduce the number of enemies before the attack. Opening his book, he decides to use the bear, the spider, and Harami. First, he would set up the rear lines similar to what he used against the orcs. All those bears had an ability to dodge attacks and would be crucial in the battle. His ideal world was one where he should dominate on his own without any manual. Thus, he was willing to fight any opponent. With a command, he sends the bears forward. Soon after, the ants start coming out of the small hole. A gigantic number of insects begins to gather. With a smile on his face, Alan was determined to finish them all one by one. That was the perfect moment to use all his strength. Without holding back, he sends his bears and spiders against the numerous ants. Shortly after, he had already managed to defeat some armored ants, gaining 3,000 experience for each. From past battles, the protagonist had discovered all the weak points of the ants. On the other hand, it was a waste of military resources. Since a full blow from a giant ant is capable of defeating a bear, he should unite countless bears against just one ant. But the intelligence of the bears is not very high, so they can only perform simple commands, making several mistakes as a group. Meanwhile, Alan continues with his daydreams, flipping through the book. One of his birds begins to fly over the battlefield, heading toward one of the bears. The bird lands on the animal's head and starts controlling its movements. Smiling, Alan realizes that his plan had worked. The effectiveness of that tactic would increase considerably. From above, he observed the battle, which was becoming increasingly powerful. After a month, he still had managed to destroy the first ant cave. Twice a week, he killed more than 200 at a time, about 2,000 per month. Something strange happened a few days after more than 200 of them were killed, since their bodies had disappeared. For him, maybe the ant queen could have been able to eat them all and immediately give birth to a new batch. Despite gaining a lot of experience that time, the ants kept appearing, making it difficult to collect the magic stones. In the end, he realized that he would have to completely change his strategy. The month of May arrived, and the Baron agreed to change the hunting work schedule, allowing Alan to hunt 2 days in a row. In his second month, the total number of ants killed surpassed 50,000. The bears on the battlefield draw his attention to the situation. Nervous, Alan awaited the appearance of a few more monsters. However, everything seemed very quiet, and the cave was empty. With a smile on his face, he realized that the ant-clearing strategy had worked. Alert, the bears watched the cave entrance together with their master. Alan didn't notice any kind of movement from the ants. Now he needed to think about his next steps. Looking at the book, he realizes that he should send more summoned birds to scout the area in search of the queen. Shortly after, an owl named Horu was selected due to its night vision ability. Those birds would share everything through their vision. Without wasting time, the protagonist sends the owls into the cave. The inside looked like a gigantic and endless labyrinth. Additionally, there were mysterious small rooms everywhere. Suddenly, he notices the appearance of some ants and decides to retreat. If found, his only option would be to summon them again. Alan calls for full cooperation with the bear battalion to finish off the remaining ants. However, the bears were extremely bad at seeing in the dark. Therefore, they needed guidance through Horo's eyes. Through the shared vision, he noticed the room where the newborn ants were. That was the place where the larvae were located. Controlling 8 summons at the same time, the bears would attack in that direction, while Horo continued the escort on the other side. Alan needed to give exact instructions, since none of those ants were allowed to live this time. Shortly after, he becomes apprehensive when noticing a new blockage. Horo gets trapped inside the cave, and his master calls him back to the cards. For him, it felt like solving a minigame in an RPG. Additionally, it was getting dark, and they would have to return to the mansion. Pensive, Alan knew he couldn't pass up the opportunity at that moment. Suddenly, he begins to see hope in all that chaos. Without a doubt, Horo had spotted the Ant Queen. The opponent was a rank B monster and had to be taken down calmly. The protagonist's current intelligence was capable of controlling 8 summons at the same time, and the Queen's room was about 5 kilometers away. The best thing to do would be to change the tactic to balance his strength. Without wasting time, he decides to enter the cave with Horo by his side. Soon, the two encounter countless ants that were protecting something precious. Meanwhile, his bears await new instructions, confused by the darkness. The young man lights up the environment, thinking that he had been waiting for that moment for 2 months. The queen appears, showing all her power, trying to scare her enemies. Alan realizes that she was indeed huge, 3 times bigger compared to a normal ant, but the head was the same size. First, you would need to build a solid defensive line and decides to take down the soldier ants. Upon hearing their master's commands, the bears begin attacking all the creatures. First of all, Alan notices that he should clean up the mess along the way. The queen joins the fight, ready to destroy all her opponents. Quickly, a powerful blow hits several bears at once. Animals are thrown far away with no time to defend themselves. At that moment, the protagonist concludes that the ants had understood his strategy, even if they were slow. Taking advantage of the enemy's slowness, he ordered a blow to the abdomen to attack. The bears listened to their master's commands and charged into battle, using their sharp teeth and claws. With some confusion, the warrior realizes that the queen was apparently inviting him to attack. As she moved, she made thunderous noises that echoed through the environment. Tension spread through the atmosphere with the powerful attack directed at the queen. Shortly after, Alan manages to destroy the Ant Queen, gaining 45,000 experience points. With only 20 bears, he was able to defeat the beast without much effort. He probably wouldn't be able to return to the city, having to sleep outside and meaning to bring the spoils to prove the reason for his absence. However, the smell spreading through the place was extremely foul. It took 2 months to conquer the first ant cave. This meant that while he killed 5,000, another 4,000 new larvae were born, weakening the queen. Even though she was a magical beast, she still needed to eat and sleep to stay healthy, which left her at a disadvantage. Shortly after, the boy holds the magic stone in his hands. But as he illuminates the item, he begins to notice something strange. In his hands, there was a stone unlike anything he had ever seen. The next day, he returns to the mansion after completing yet another task. The Baron seems extremely angry about the boy's unauthorized departure and waits for an apology. Alan says that he went on a mission to the slopes of the White Dragon Mountain and yesterday conquered the lair of the armored ants. With determination, the boy seemed committed to completing the task to help the Graybeard family. Meanwhile, they exchange glances with each other. Cecil claims that the boy was lying about his mission. At that moment, Alan realizes that the news of his invasion into the monster's territory had not reached the Baron. Therefore, he was willing to prove it by showing the shell of the Ant Queen. The family members seem to show no reaction without any thanks or smiles. The Baron asks Xenoph if that could really be a queen, since its color was strange, different from a normal armored ant. Despite everything, the commander of the Knights says he had never seen a queen before. For that destroy an ant nest was something extremely impossible. Cecil asks if Alan had painted the ant shell just to deceive everyone. However, the protagonist believes that the Knight Commander should also be capable of defeating the queen. Until now, Xenoph claims he had never known anyone capable of destroying a giant ant colony. The greatest achievement conquered by the Knights was the villages of orcs and goblins. Curiously, Cecil asks if his friend was really able to kill thousands of ants and explore the labyrinth. The boy simply nods without mentioning the summoned beasts. Desperate, he begins to rummage through his bag. Those magic stones have been collected from the Ant Queen's chamber. Upon seeing those items, the men are extremely shocked. The Baron knew that this was not something that could be collected randomly or easily. With a smile on his face, Alan realizes that he was gaining the men's trust. At that moment, Cecil and his mother realize that the boy had conquered the lair of the armored ants. Xenoph seems to trust the boy's abilities greatly, saying that for him, anything was possible. Finally, the Baron asks the boy to accompany him and explain all the details. The matriarch of the Graybeard family concludes that Alan was capable of defeating a rank B monster on his own. In the end, the smile on Cecil's face reveals all the pride he felt for his friend. Meanwhile, in a room, the boy was telling everything he knew. On the map, he points out the cave he had conquered. That was the 5th mine, and the knights would be dispatched there immediately. First of all, the boy informs them that he also possesses the map of the cave. Confused, the men seem unsure how to proceed with that situation. Due to the remarkable feat, the Baron decides to forgive the protagonist for being out all night. Moreover, his name had been added to the list of those who discovered the nation's valuable mithril mines. According to the law, he would be entitled to 30% of the mine's proceeds under the mining rights guaranteed by the king. Confused, Alan seems not to understand what those words meant. The butler explains that half of the mithril would be taken to the royal family, and the mining rights would benefit the remainder. Thus, 7 parts would go to the king and 3 parts would be Alan's property. At that moment, the boy freezes upon hearing the information. This time, he had obtained a substantial benefit and should take advantage of it. Without even knowing, the protagonist had laid his hands on an unexpected prize. In October, Alan turned 12 years old. The Graybeard family was finally able to mine mithril again after 100 years, and the discovered mine would be exploited the following year. The conquest of the Armored Ant's lair ended peacefully, and now he no longer needed to worry about money or threats. Despite everything, the protagonist continued to feel something strange. From the beginning, he only wanted to play like crazy to reach the top, and that peace was not something he desired. Therefore, he was determined to jump to the next level. Suddenly, a servant informs him that the royal family's emissary was at the location again. The two go to meet the man who would cause a lot of trouble for the Baron. The Viscount of Culner had returned carrying a suitcase in his subordinate's hands. Everyone sits at a long table. Without wasting any more time, the Baron asked about the reason for the new visit. After stating that he was pleased with the successful mining, he says that he brought an offer. The Graybeard and Culner clans had often taken turns competing on the mountain, and now the royal family wanted to solve that problem. Shortly after, the butler hands a letter to the patriarch. Nervously, he realizes that it was in order to manage the Backlong Mountain territory together with Culner. The children seem unhappy with that situation. The messenger explains that the families would manage the mountain area, with profits equally divided between the clans. Furthermore, Viscount Culner had already signed the treaty, leaving only Lord Graybeard's signature. Alan realized the kind of trick being played on these people again. Apologizing, the head of the family asks for the letter to be taken back to the capital for verification. Irritated, the man realizes that the Baron was doubting them and accuses him of greed regarding the mithril. Shortly after, they decide to leave the mansion. His wife begins to notice how much that situation was affecting her husband. There was nothing absolute in a stupid contract like that. A butler informs that the commander of the knights would take 2 days to return from the White Dragon Mountain. If he returned in time, he should go with the Baron to the capital. Additionally, Master Thomas would also be notified about his father's arrival. Looking into Cecil's eyes, he declares that he wouldn't allow anyone to touch the Gabriel territory. Meanwhile, the protagonist observed the entire complicated situation. Perhaps he should set aside his resignation request for now and help the family. In the kitchen, he overhears the conversation of 2 maids who seemed worried about moving to Backlong Mountain. Managing with equal gains sounded good, but Culner probably had an evil plan behind it all. The women believed that if the master refused this time, he would be called greedy by everyone. Suddenly, a scream invades the entire environment, leaving Alan completely shocked. In desperation, someone was screaming for Miss Cecil. Worried, the protagonist left the kitchen and headed toward the stairs. Upon reaching the upper floor, he saw one of the servants wounded and leaning against the wall. Bandits had invaded Cecil's room, and one of them was carrying the unconscious girl in his arms. At that moment, the protagonist realized he had to use something to stop that situation. Grabbing his sword, he was ready to defend the girl from that attack. With a strike, he tries to approach a fearsome figure with an eye patch. The furious look on the warrior's face showed all his determination to protect the lady. The fight between the two begins while another man runs away with the girl in his arms. Alan is thrown backward, realizing that his opponent was too strong. His best option would be to use some support cards. Additionally, he used the Leaves of Life to restore 1,000 stamina. Increasingly angry, his opponent was determined to finish the girl. Suddenly, Alan starts showing all his skills, wielding his sword with strength. Meanwhile, the news of an intruder in the Graybeard family mansion reaches the Baron's ears. His wife and he become completely terrified by that situation. Upstairs, the boy tried to fight in every way to protect Cecil. But the other bandit throws a smoke bomb into the environment, showing that it was already time to leave. Losing consciousness, Alan can only watch those thieves carrying Cecil away. Shortly after, the protagonist's body loses strength and falls to the ground. His gaze seems confused, unable to do anything to help the lady. Beside him, he realizes that Cecil was still breathing, even with her mouth covered. At that moment, he realizes that even a simple servant had been kidnapped. Luckily, the protagonist was still alive, even though he had been very reckless. A summoned creature can fight as long as it can see, so he decides to use the Chiapi birds. From above, he begins to observe the situation, with 3 bandits watching the children tied up on the floor. They were the same guys from before, and the place seemed to be a warehouse. At all times, the boy seemed worried about the situation and pretended to be asleep to avoid suspicion. Shortly after, Dagraha appears in the room and looks confused when he notices the 2 children. With a smile on his face, one of the bandits says he thought the black-haired boy could be sold for a good price. Irritated, the man punches his colleague in the stomach, clearly disagreeing with that stupid idea. With anger in his eyes, Dagra says that the man shouldn't act on his own and would be forgiven next time. Understanding the order, the bandit decides to step back to recover from the blow. Before leaving, the warrior orders them to kill a black-haired boy to save space. Meanwhile, Alan grows more nervous, realizing that this guy was more dangerous than the other three combined. To the injured bandit, Dagraha was just a fugitive who had been on the run for over a year. Suddenly, one of the men mentions that this warrior could defeat Sinuf. Alan's mind immediately thinks of the commander of the knights upon hearing his name. The bandit becomes curious when he hears that Dagraha could defeat someone who had served dutifully for over 10 years. Apparently, all of Zenof's soldiers were dead, and it would be foolish to head to the battlefield. Not understanding anything, the protagonist realizes there was a war happening somewhere. Finally, they discuss the possibility of selling both children or just the boy. Alan knew that the best thing to do was to save himself instead of waiting to be rescued. Besides losing his mithril sword, he only had 3 iron balls and a short sword. He notices that one of the men is leaving to go to the bathroom. Without wasting time, he decides to use chat to explore the escape route. Confused, the bandit doesn't understand why there are birds on the ship. Hearing that, Alan realizes he was very far away since there was no sea near the Greybeard territory. Kayap continues exploring everywhere, thinking about guiding Harami to the coast. Suddenly, the bird notices some windows on the ship. Outside, it was already dark with countless stars in the sky. High up on the wall, a radio transmits a message thanking them for trusting Bahona's services. The airflow was unstable at the moment, and they should pay attention in case the magic airship started shaking. Shortly after, Alan's expression completely changes when he realizes he was actually flying through the skies. The magic airship was something extremely unexpected for the boy. Moreover, he realized there was no escape when flying higher than the clouds. His best chance would be when the magic airship was about to land. Despite everything, he decided to continue his exploration looking for Dagraha. The flow of people inside the airship was very large. Shortly after, the bird arrives at a luxurious restaurant full of customers. Realizing that his presence was noticed by many people, he thinks about asking for help. Suddenly, he hears a familiar laugh coming from the same place. At that moment, he begins to reflect on the presence of Viscount Connor on the magic airship. Meanwhile, the means of transportation continued flying through the skies. Kayap approaches to listen more closely to the conversation. Apparently, the Viscount could be the person behind Cecil's kidnapping. The men were discussing the new vice minister who would take a seat in the ministry. Alan remembers the contract shown to Baron Granville. The appointment of a vice minister meant they needed to mobilize and allocate money in many places, such as the Backlong Mountain. To the messenger, the lower nobles should know their place. Agreeing, the Viscount said it was refreshing to see the Baron's bitter face. Since the Baron's interference would be bad for both of them, they decided to kidnap his daughter as a hostage. Additionally, a warning letter had already been sent to the man with the main information. If even then he broke the contract, then a part of Miss Cecil's hand would pay for his choice. Upon hearing those words, Alan becomes increasingly angry. If the Baron crossed the territory to save his daughter, he would be prosecuted for rebellion. The messenger's help would be properly rewarded when the Viscount received the rights to the mithril mines. The protagonist realizes that this dirty plan was being executed with the power of money. To him, the Baron was truly in a very difficult position. Suddenly, Cecil opens her eyes and becomes extremely nervous with what she sees. One of the thieves notices that the girl had awakened from her deep sleep. Her expression reveals all the shock and fear of being in that situation. Without thinking twice, she kicks Alan's leg. But the bandit with the eye patch warns her that it would be better for her to go back to sleep peacefully. Additionally, her magic could not be used and they were almost arriving in the city of Kalno. Completely desperate, Cecil kicked the servant's legs with all her strength. Tears began to form on her face, showing all the fear in her expression. Standing up, the bandit threatened her, saying that she didn't know pain and that's why she was disobeying orders. At that moment, the protagonist realized there was no way to delay any longer and had to act immediately. Using his summoning ability, he started plotting a way to escape the situation. In the end, the plan to protect the summoner was prepared, and it should counterattack. Shortly after, the butterfly Ajao appeared in the warehouse. Confused, everyone seemed unable to understand the presence of magical beasts. Suddenly, the insect began unleashing its powers against the enemies. Still lying on the ground, Alan realized that his plan worked on people, even if only on one. Without wasting any more time, the long-haired man cut the insect with his sword. The butterfly completely disappeared from his sight, leaving him intrigued. Suddenly, the protagonist managed to free himself from the ropes that bound his arms. People's gazes were impressed by his abilities. Standing up, Alan was ready for the fight and determined to strike back. However, the bandits didn't believe that Boy could defeat them without a real weapon. Flipping through his book, he summoned a large bear to bite and scratch his opponents. Cecil and the bandits looked shocked by the appearance of another magical beast. The bear attacked one of the men fiercely, but he was able to deliver intense blows with his weapon. Noticing his companion's distraction, Alan decided to try and approach with a punch to the stomach. At that moment, he realized the second guy had been defeated, still weak after being punched by his boss. Meanwhile, the man with the eye patch grew increasingly irritated with the boy's actions. Gripping his weapon, he was determined to face that small threat. The protagonist knew it was necessary to clean up that place before allies arrived. Still tied up, Cecil watched the entire fight with extreme anxiety. Now the two would duel one against the other. Shortly after, Alan decided to defend himself with Bron's shield. Once again, the man was baffled by the situation. The protagonist's goal was to buy as much time as possible that way. Therefore, he decided to summon for the battle insect fish. Alan controlled Harami, using aquatic scales to protect himself. Even tired, Bron used his shield to protect the master from the imminent danger. But the boy was more concerned with ensuring Cecil's safety, watching for any suspicious movement. The spider would use its webs to tie up the opponent, and Shu would be responsible for weakening him. Upon hearing the command, the insects headed toward the opponent. At that moment, the man realized the boy's ability was to manipulate magical beasts. Confused, he couldn't believe there was such a talent in the world. When caught by the webs, Alan decided to approach with his small sword. With determination, he tried to stab the weapon into the opponent's body. The man felt some pain, but it wasn't enough to defeat him. That defense was incredible, like skin too tough to be penetrated by swords. Even so, the protagonist was determined to exhaust all his strength. On the ground, Cecil seemed displeased with all the violence around her. Shortly after, the man collapsed, completely injured. Tired, the boy realized that his plan had worked. Suddenly, a warning informed that the ship was about to land in Kalmal territory. Realizing they had arrived in the city, Alan looked in Cecil's direction. Kneeling, he said he would untie the ropes that bound the girl's body. A door opened and Dagra began to observe all the mess inside the warehouse. With a slight smile on his face, he said he hadn't expected to have such a boy on board. His men were lying on the floor, completely defeated. Realizing the man was in the place, Alan called for Bron, seeking some kind of protection. But the powerful warrior was faster and managed to land a blow on the child. His body was thrown far, hitting his back against the wall. Due to the attack, Alan fell to the ground immediately. Meanwhile, Cecil watched the entire scene with tears in her eyes. Slowly, the boy tried to recover his breath, which seemed almost non-existent. Dagraha was too fast, attacking as soon as the boy turned, as if he had disappeared out of nowhere. The bandit mocked his opponent, saying that the boy still hadn't learned any skills. Even so, the protagonist was more worried about figuring out a way to defeat his enemy. First, he needed to save Cecil from danger. Alan decided to use the Tree of Life as a form of recovery, but Dagra had declared that it was useless. Shortly after, a voice could be heard coming from outside. The man didn't seem to understand the situation, looking quite confused. Alan used the false voice ability and ordered Dagraha to bring Cecil outside. Realizing that his enemy was distracted, he decides to launch an attack. Alan summons a spider which heads toward the big man, ready to restrain his body with webs. Meanwhile, the protagonist holds the girl in his arms and runs away without looking back. But Dagraha notices his movement and becomes extremely furious. To defend himself, Alan uses Bron with his shield to try to stop the enemy. The protagonist climbs the stairs as fast as he can. Dagraha had easily broken through the spider webs and would be able to defeat Bron in no time. Upon reaching the upper floor, he heads toward one of the windows. The loudspeaker had announced that they had entered the city. Looking outside, he notices a landing area and estimates that the vehicle must be about 100 meters above the ground. At that moment, he tells Cecil to be ready to jump. First, he needs to increase their defense to avoid severe damage. With resistance enhanced for safety, both should jump at any moment. Alan counts to 3 and jumps out of the window, carrying Cecil in his arms. The protagonist heads toward the ground, using his feet for support. Shortly after, the boy begins to feel intense pain throughout his body due to broken bones. Cecil looked extremely scared, with tears streaming down her face. In the end, Alan shouts the girl's name while recovering his strength, the Tree of Life. With a smile on his face, he says that they would both return together to the Graybill mansion. He asks if Cecil is hurt, and she replies that she's fine but wants to know where the magical creatures are. Touching her arm, he says they need to leave there before being found. Alan puts Cecil on his shoulders and starts running as fast as he can. She says she found an exit and believes the city ahead is Kalmal. The boss elsewhere becomes furious upon learning that the youths are still alive. His employee finds it impossible that they survived that huge fall. So the boss decides to capture the bodies because Cecil is essential to the plan. The two show an item to the guard, who realizes it belongs to the Gabriel family. But the man finds it strange that the two came alone, though Alan says it was Cecil's choice. Outside, she celebrates and praises the boy's convincing lies. They discuss which path to take to avoid the White Dragon. Cecil worries about the days of travel and the darkness around them. Alan reassures her, saying he activated his night vision. The two stop to rest in a place that looks like a cave. He says they need to take care of their needs before continuing the journey. Cecil doesn't like the commanding tone and makes a sulky face. The boy shows the dinner, and she wonders where that food came from. The owl is with them, and Cecil wants to know if she can talk to beasts. He replies that all summoned beasts are docile while petting the animal. Cecil looks at him suspiciously, and he asks if she's scared. She says they've known each other for 4 years, so it's not surprising. The enemy wonders if Kalmal has already discovered that they're alive. Alan observes and comments that they're leaving the city. Cecil panics when she hears that the destination is the cave. The boy says they need to flee immediately because the enemies are heading there. She asks how he knows that, and he explains that he summoned a beast for reconnaissance. Then he puts her back on his shoulders and says he will increase his speed stats. He also mentions that Dagraha is following the tracks left on the way. Alan realizes that Dagraha has a natural talent as a tracking scout. Kya suggests leaving false tracks and runs back and forth. The protagonist says that now Dagraha will take about 100 years to find them. Dagraha observes the false tracks and becomes completely confused. Cecil asks if the boy is going to fight him, but he says it would be useless. According to Alan, Dagraha is the leader of the group that forced them to board. They look toward the horizon and see that the other path leads to the White Dragon Mountain. The fearless boy summons Bron, who raises his shield, and some guards appear to help. Cecil is impressed by Alan's summoning ability. They believe that Dagraha may be far away but has not given up the hunt. They decide to sleep among the trees to recover their energy. As she prepares to sleep, Cecil turns to the side, thoughtful. She asks why Alan hides his talent. The boy says his talent is too dangerous to be revealed. According to Alan, if anyone discovers his talent, they might try to eliminate him. The next day, he wakes Cecil so they can continue the escape. The boy realizes that Dagraha has found the real trail hidden in the tree trunk. Dagraha wonders if the two have already figured out his tracking ability. He then runs in a spiral, trying to find the right direction. Cecil doubts he's capable of doing that. Furious, Dagraha tells himself that they won't escape. The boy decides to erase the footprints again to throw him off. The next day, at the northern border of White Dragon, the guards receive Cecil with joy. Tired still on Alan's shoulders, she says she's back. The guards ask them to rest as the carriage will be prepared. Alan says he doesn't need a carriage since he runs faster than horses. He leaves carrying Cecil, leaving the guards confused. The girl notices that he looks more serious and asks what happened. He says the summoned beast lost Dagraha's signal. The boy suspects that Dagraha is fast enough to even escape Hook's vision. He also believes Dagraha noticed he was being tracked. Cecil says that if he left her behind, he could escape more easily. Alan knows all of this is too much for a 12-year-old girl. Even so, he promises that he'll protect her because he runs faster than anyone and has a promise to keep. Cecil asks what promise he's talking about. He reveals that he promised young Master Mihi that he would protect Cecil at all costs. Getting emotional, she starts crying and can only say thank you. With the girl on his shoulders, Alan asks the owl to watch Dagraha's movements. On the morning of the third day, they were still on the road. Cecil asks if they'll make it by tomorrow at this pace. Alan doesn't reply and simply hands her herbs to eat. In the sky, evils appear and send an alert signal. Immediately, the boy stops walking and looks around carefully. Cecil's heart races when she sees how serious he became. Suddenly, a giant shadow appears on the horizon at high speed. Alan prepares while watching the enemy approach. It's Madagalu, the same one who lost an eye to him 3 years ago. Cecil asks what's happening with a trembling voice. Then the boy calmly replies that they are being chased. According to him, it's dangerous to face two at the same time, so he decides to eliminate one before the other arrives. She asks if he can really defeat that creature. The smile he gives is pure confidence and certainty. Keeping his eyes fixed on the creature, he says he's going to win. Cecil only asks that he does his best in this fight. The monster is now right in front of him and looks ready to attack. Alan stares at the beast and says it's been a while since their last encounter. The tension between them is thick and about to explode. He then asks the enemy to fight with everything it has. Cecil watches the creature in fear and asks if Alan can really win. Very serious, Alan asks her to stay silent so she won't be detected. He thinks he needs to win before Dagraha catches up with them. According to him, his advantage is the army of beasts by his side. Several bears charge full force toward the creature, but they are crushed easily as if they were nothing. Alan realizes he's wasting his strength like this. He shouts for the guards to form a circle around the monster. Taking advantage of the distraction, he orders the bears to attack again. This time, the bears climb the creature and bite hard. Madagalu roars loudly, feeling the pain pierce through its body. Alan notices that it's more cautious than last time. The fight intensifies and the creature starts attacking with everything. From a distance, Cecil understands that this is how Alan fights. Alan believes he can win. After all, it's just a rank B monster. Suddenly, the creature leaps into the air, heading straight for him. Alan panics and calls the guards, creating a shield. But the impact is so strong that the guards are thrown away. The beast grabs Alan with its hands and stares at him with one eye. Trapped, he wonders if he can still get out of that situation. Desperate, Cecil runs and screams his name with all her might. But he tells her to stay back, saying it's okay. In reality, Alan realizes that the monster wants to have fun with his pain. The monster lifts the boy and opens its mouth to devour him. Cecil watches in terror as he starts being swallowed. The monster starts with his legs, thinking Alan has already lost. But when the boy's face gets close to the beast's eye, Alan asks if it usually eats fish from the tail. With no time to react, the creature feels something pierce through its eye. The boy drives the sword straight into the only eye it had left. He says he switched his cards when he was caught. According to him, the monster's mistake was not killing him right away. Alan tells the creature to go straight to the depths of hell. He says that the creature's strength was weak, that's why it lost to the bronze. He also says that he created dozens of grams of life to fight against Dagraha. But now he will use as many as necessary against Madagalu. While being crushed, his body begins to heal multiple times. The boy smiles, feeling the nostalgia of fighting difficult bosses. The creature can't take it anymore and collapses completely to the ground. Alan finally defeats Madagalu and feels that his revenge is complete. Cecil runs to him crying, asking if he's okay. He says yes, since he still has several potions stored. But she can't hold it anymore and starts crying, relieved. Cecil thought he had truly lost this time. Alan watches her and apologizes for scaring her so much. He looks to the side and realizes that it's not over yet. Confused, she turns and also sees who they fear the most. Dagraha appears behind the two with a look full of fury. He declares that he will finish Alan once and for all. He admits that he didn't expect them to defeat Madagalu. Taking heavy steps, he approaches ready to attack. Alan realizes he is without his iron orbs. He also realizes that he left the sword stuck in the monster's eye. Unarmed, he faces the enemy with determination. With no choice, he tells Cecil to step back because he will fight to the end. Dagraha gives an ironic smile and calls him a loyal servant. In the blink of an eye, he delivers an absurd kick that launches Alan far away. Cecil watches everything terrified, unable to react. On the ground, Alan tries to understand what happened. He realizes that he might have run out of magical energy. Dagraha walks arrogantly and mocks his condition. He asks if the boy won't summon any more creatures, since that's his only talent. Using a mocking tone, he asks if his magic is over. With the sword in hand, he points at the fallen boy and says the game is over. But a gigantic noise interrupts the moment. Everyone turns and sees Cecil staring with something different in her eyes. Alan is shocked and wonders if it was her who used magic. Cecil also seems surprised by what just happened. She stares at the scene with a new look and understands that she needs to save Alan. She also remembers the warning she received about how dangerous magic is. Alan begs her not to do it, but it's already too late. Cecil is hypnotized and launches a fireball at Dagraha. The enemy reacts quickly and throws the girl before the attack hits. Alan panics as he sees Cecil falling injured to the ground. Dagraha stares at the fallen girl and asks if she thought she would get away unscathed. He then turns to the boy and smiles at the boy's rage. With his head down, the young man asks if the enemy fled the battlefield a year ago. Then he says that now he only knows how to attack defenseless children. Alan calls him a bastard, and that seems to hit the enemy hard. Angry, Dagraha hits the injured boy with an even stronger kick. Even fallen, the young man whispers, asking him to get even angrier. The provocation continues, and Dagraha charges with more violence. Alan thinks to himself that now he understands how the skills work. According to him, the first depends on the opponent's magical power. The second comes from intense training since childhood. Old memories come to the surface as he tries to resist. Alan realizes that many there are in normal mode with extras. He notices that he was born with the talent of summoner, and that sets him apart. He also realizes that Dagraha is a tracker and has extra tracking. Alan blocks the sword combo at the last second and survives. Dagraha calls him a stubborn brat for continuing to insist. On the ground, Alan laughs and thinks about how much he can still evolve. The enemy gets even more irritated and keeps hitting hard. Confused, he asks how many healing charms the boy still has. Alan asks if he's tired already because now it's too late to run. Dagraha finds the boy's words strange and tries to understand the reason. The young man says that since the attack on Cecil, his sentence was sealed. Alan looks to the sky and sees the bird that was following him before. The great bird descends and transforms into a mysterious man. Xenof appears before everyone asks how that boy is still breathing. Dagraha realizes he was deceived and that the boy was just buying time. Fallen and bleeding, Alan can barely move but keeps talking. He asks Xenof to finish it already and end the fight. Dagraha confirms that the man is Xenof and takes a step back. Xenof looks at the two injured young ones and says that now it's up to him. He advances saying that he will cut down the enemy in the name of the commander. Dagraha mocks and says that the noble son of Xenof disgusts him. Surprised, Xenof asks him to repeat what he just said. The enemy smiles, saying he loves crushing parasites like him. Alan notices that Dagraha is also activating his ability. Xenof realizes that he is an explorer of the analysis and concealment type. Ready to attack, Dagraha says that only idiots sacrifice themselves for nothing. He screams, saying that all explorers died and only he remained. He hates nobles and feels disgusted just thinking about their existence. With hatred, he drives a magical stake straight into Xenof's chest, but the weapon stops halfway and doesn't pierce him. Xenof reveals that he is a swordsman, and that's why the attack failed. With his eyes glowing, he says that his friends died for him. Then he shouts that Dagraha will not escape his own fate. He pierces the enemy with his aura blade and ends the fight. Cecil wakes up and sees something that leaves her completely speechless. Alan also sees it and can't believe what just happened. Finally, the three return to the castle after the long battle. Cecil's parents run over when they see Alan all injured and covered in strawberry juice. And so, after 4 days of intense fighting, the pursuit comes to an end. Alan is in the bathtub thinking about how lucky nobles are to be able to bathe like this every day. He recalls the last mission and realizes how much he has learned. The protagonist thinks he needs a plan to resist poison, and remembers that when the Knight Commander killed Dagraha, if he had been a demon beast, the bonus experience would have appeared. However, he received no notification. Getting out of the bathtub, Alan realizes that he has to report this to the Baron. At the assembly, the Baron asks Alan if that was really just a trick from Kauno. Alan replies that yes, and that he did it to gain the position of Minister of Justice. He also says that's why Kauno allied himself with the messenger. The people present in the assembly are outraged by the revelation and call Kauno a bastard. But the Baron becomes very angry and states that he will report this to the palace. He says that what they did is unforgivable. Alan intervenes, saying that this will change nothing because even the emissary is involved. With the idea in mind, the protagonist decides to speak. He announces that he will give up his mining privileges and hand them over to the Baron. Everyone looks at the boy in shock. Alan continues, saying that with that power, the Baron will have more strength at the negotiation table. Still perplexed, the Baron asks if he is suggesting that he secretly bribed the royal source. Trying to convince him, Alan explains that this way the Baron will always have advantages first. The Baron becomes thoughtful about that idea. Alan thinks that maybe the Baron is too righteous a person to do that. But without that resource, there will be a second or third Kauno to threaten him. He says that he and his father always work hard on the farm and they only did it to protect their family. Annoyed, Alan questions how nobles don't want to do the same to take care of their families since they are nobles. One of those present asks the boy not to say such things. The Baron interrupts and says it's okay. Telling his story, the Baron says that when he was Alan's age, his father died and he lost his title. After that, his mother died, and shortly after, his brother also passed away. He continues, saying that even as a child, he had to learn to fend for himself. Turning to the protagonist, the Baron apologizes and says that he will accept the mining privileges. Alan asks what exactly is a noble's obligation. Cecil hears the question and tells her father that she also wants to know the answer. A little embarrassed, the girl's father says that the teachers will explain it to her. The Baron then states that he must prepare for the trip and asks those who remain to take good care of the mansion. A few days after the Baron heads to the capital, Cecil is in class with her teacher and Alan. The teacher says it's a relief to know the young lady as well, but she replies that it was all thanks to Alan. The boy counters, saying that she also helped him. Then the girl tells the teacher that she doesn't like being ignorant. Alan asks the teacher to explain what a noble's obligation is. The instructor asks both of them to keep what he is about to say a secret. He continues and asks them to look at the map to explain it better. Looking at the map, Alan realizes that he was born in a small kingdom and wonders why the Northern Empire is so big. The teacher says that in the past, this kingdom was invaded by the Empire, but now is a time of peace, not war. He continues and says that the obligation of the nobility was erased from history. He further adds that the truth of that world lies in another historical system. Finally, he points to the map and says that this is the history of the Demon King, and that it comes from the forgotten continent where he was born. The two young ones are frightened upon hearing the name Demon King. Alan thinks to himself that he saw this before reincarnating. The teacher says that 112 years ago, a man called the Demon King of the End sought the surrender of all kings, but the kings did not accept submission. Telling the story, he says that 60 years ago, the great disaster happened and all beasts became inexplicably violent. E-rank monsters became as strong as S-rank ones, and in this way, many people died. Alan, paying attention, asks if all of this was the work of the Demon King. The teacher says he doesn't know, but according to rumors, that was the Demon King's final act. He says that not long after, the claws of the Demon King reached the south. At that moment, a great army of demon beasts invaded the Zhongying continent, but no one knew who the Demon King was. In 4 years, that army destroyed 4 kingdoms. The teacher says that perhaps the purpose of that king was to let the beasts rule the continent. Alan comments that this story is very scary. The man continues, saying that this army has already invaded 2 continents. They invaded the continent where the dwarves live, the continent of Vukas. The second place they invaded was the residence of the elves, Roseheim, but they fought bravely. Cecil and Alan listen to the story, perplexed. The girl asks if elves and dwarves really exist then. The teacher says that to stop that Demon King, the alliance of the 5 continents was formed. But unfortunately, the situation did not improve. Many people and warriors died, and the Baron's father also perished. At that time, the system of 1 academy per country was born, and many talented people began training. But even so, that did not stop the Demon King. The Jiamon Empire fell completely into his hands. Still speaking, the teacher says that at that time, he also fought to protect the world and saw many of his comrades die. He reveals that the creator of the world did not abandon humans, and then hope arose. At that moment, Helios appeared as the first person in the world with heroic talent. Helios graduated from the academy and ended up defeating many from that army one by one. Alan wonders why that story feels like an RPG game. The teacher says that their kingdom was never invaded, which is why they must obey the tribute pact, sending supplies to the battlefield. Alan realizes that the place where he was born belongs to the war. This way, he understands why the Baron accepted the order to increase the tribute. According to the teacher, that is a rule agreed upon between the continents. Everyone must go for at least 3 years to the battlefield, whether noble or not. He also states that there is a place as good as where the hero commands. More than half of the people do not return from the battlefield. Cecil realizes that's where Mihi was sent to fight. Alan gets irritated upon hearing that more than half of the people die in that war. The teacher also reveals that those who return after 3 years gain benefits, such as being able to retire. He says that he is Cecil's mage and will train her for when the time comes. Cecil thanks him and Alan says he has a question for the master. He realizes that when the Demon King appeared, the normal world was destroyed, leaving only the Hell mode. Now the Demon King and the hero coexist, and it was him who tilted the balance. The Baron returned to the mansion after a month in the royal capital. He says that the problem with Kalmal is over and that he will no longer harm anyone. One of the servants calls Alan because the Baron is asking for him. In the office, the Baron thanks Alan for protecting Cecil. He gives Alan 200 coins for saving his daughter and another 200 for killing Madagalu. Alan thanks him but gets confused when he sees a third sack of coins. The Baron continues and talks about his daughter, who at some point will have to go to battle. Alan says that Cecil has a lot of power and that this power will be highly valued on the battlefield. The Baron states that he wishes to ask the boy for one more favor. He says that the boy's supposed lack of talent is just a disguise and that he trusts him. The other 200 coins are to protect Cecil both on the battlefield and at the academy. When he sees the 600 coins, Alan thinks about how much he has gone without eating because he was poor. Alan reveals that his true talent is that of a summoner, but that he hid it from the church. The young man says that he accepts taking care of Cecil, leaving the Baron impressed. But Alan states that he doesn't want the coins as a reward. He asks for his family to be exempt from paying taxes. The Baron accepts the offer without hesitation. Alan says that he will prepare himself to protect the Baron's daughter. He also asks to be exempt from his service so he can dedicate himself to Cecil's protection. The Baron confirms the request, and then he hands a sword to Alan. He then says that the sword is a gift from Viscount Gambriel for the family's special guest. Alan doesn't understand those words. The Baron explains that thanks to Alan, the Gambriel family was promoted to Viscount. Still confused, the young man asks who this special guest is. The Baron says he is sure that Alan will become an adventurer when he turns 12, but he doesn't want to let him go. He reveals that the special guest is Alan, and that the Viscount family will be his shield. At that moment, the Baron bows, thanking the young man for his 4 years of work. Alan thanks him, moved by the Baron's words. In Karina village, a humble woman and her children realize that no letter arrived in the mail. When they look back, they see Alan and celebrate his arrival. They get emotional seeing how much he has grown in those 4 years. Alan is also surprised by how much his siblings have grown. He notices that one of his sisters no longer recognizes him, which saddens him. His parents call him to eat something. They offer him soup, and Alan thinks the house looks a bit smaller than before. His mother thanks him for sending money every month, but asks how he has managed to support himself. The protagonist says that he will no longer be able to send money home. His father asks what happened. Alan says that he is now going to the academy, leaving everyone in shock. He shows the sword he received for saving Cecil, and says that now they won't need to pay taxes anymore. Alan hands over a sack with 100 coins to his family. They wonder what happened over the last 4 years. The family, still in shock, asks him to keep the coins for his expenses at the academy. The young man says it's okay because he still has a lot of money. He starts talking about some of the goblins he faced. The family listens, unable to believe it. The father comments to his wife that their son is a strange human. Then the young man says goodbye to the family and says he will get in touch when needed. His little brother smiles and says he will also go to the academy when he turns 12, making Alan happy. His little sister shows him a letter he wrote a long time ago. The boy kneels down and apologizes for the delay. The little girl just gives him a tight hug, making him emotional. The father asks his son to take care of himself. The mother asks him not to work too hard. Already in March, Alan is back at the mansion as the main guest. Cecil watches him annoyed and asks why he didn't tell her he had stopped serving her. Alan replies that he will continue serving until he goes to the academy. He asks why she is angry since he will still be her bodyguard. Cecil asks if he really wants to go to the academy. She says he can simply return to the village if he wants. The boy replies that he really wants to go to the academy. Cecil asks if he prefers going to war where he won't be safe, and reminds him that he doesn't have that obligation. Alan replies that he knows that. At that moment, Dagoma and Karima show up calling for Alan. Cecil doesn't recognize them. The boys introduce themselves and explain who they are. They run to hug him after 4 years without seeing each other. Cecil hears her brother calling her in the background. Alan's friends say that it's already been 4 years since they last saw each other. Then Alan apologizes and comments that there are only 3 days left until the exam, asking if everyone is ready. His friend replies that they are prepared because in those 4 years they become much stronger. She also says that now she can even take down a large wild boar. Cecil asks her brother if everyone in the village learns to be very skilled since childhood, and he replies that only those two are able to hunt. Alan asks if they study for the technical exam, and his 2 friends get embarrassed. His friend asks if he is also going to take the exam. The boy replies that yes, he will participate and has been studying for it. His friend deduces that Alan also has a talent. The young man simply apologizes for not telling them before. Dogger says he already knew, and his sister comments that he also didn't pass the exam last year. Then young Alan introduces Cecil, the Baron's daughter. The young girl also introduces herself as Cecil Gandriel. Thomas Gandriel, Cecil's brother, also introduces himself and says that he hopes everyone becomes friends. Alan's friend says that she and Cecil will become great friends. The master appears and thanks the young girl for coming. She returns the thanks to the master. Alan thinks to himself that he should get her to drop that habit. The master meets Alan's friends and asks them to rest for the next 3 days. Everyone observes the mansion and thinks the place is pretty big. They also take the opportunity to eat a lot. Seeing his friend making the biggest mess, Alan tells little Cecil that she is a sword master. Excited, Karina talks about how she imagines the academy to be. Duggar says that he just wants to graduate quickly and join the Night Order. Cecil asks Alan if they should tell the secret to them, but the boy says it's not the right time yet. Little Karina still doesn't know that she will also have to join the battlefield. 3 days later, Cecil says goodbye to her parents to go to the academy. The girl's brother calls Alan and asks him to teach his sister to fight on her own. Meanwhile, Cecil's father asks the boy not to tell others about the Demon King. The man says that he has many friends, but that his daughter will be under Alan's care. He tells the Viscount not to worry. With determination, Alan says he will defeat the Demon Lord together with Cecil. But the girl's father gets startled and says that he didn't ask that of him. They both say goodbye and leave. The other servants also bid farewell to the two. And so those 4 friends begin their journey. In the north of the Zhongying continent, a guard informs the Lord Hero that the magic train has arrived. The guard says that the Elemental King had another prediction, that he must have another projection of hope. This catches the attention of the Lord Hero, and he says that he needs to see this with his own eyes. From above, on a kind of airship, the 4 young ones observe the city. Upon stepping on the ground, they see that many people are also flying around. Cecil asks if those are the flying balloons made by dwarves, and Alan confirms. But when they see a train, they are even more impressed. Alan goes to buy the tickets, and Cecil gets annoyed seeing that it doesn't impress him that much. The friends are also impressed with the speed of the train. They are even amazed by the size of the buildings. At the academy, they observe the 20,000 applicants who arrive every year. Cecil complains about seeing so many talented people her age. Alan is determined and thinks that they only have 3 years to pass the tests. The master welcomes them to the kingdom of Rathashu, but he says that before starting the exams, he needs to reassess their talents. Alan's friend asks what this evaluation is, and he replies that it's the same one they did in childhood. The boy goes first, and the staff member instructs him to touch the crystal. The woman says that Dobra has a great talent. The protagonist observes how the growth rate works. When it's Cecil's turn, Alan notices that she has rank E in intelligence. When it's Karina's turn, the staff congratulates her for her talents. This makes Cecil feel insecure. Everyone watches attentively for Alan's turn. Besides that, all of the boys' stats show as E, which leaves everyone confused. In this way, they understand that the crystal didn't provide any answer. Alan says that because of Hell Mode, his growth rate all appears as E. He turns to little Cecil and says that even if she goes to another school, he will continue protecting her. Then the headmaster appears, asking about the commotion going on. They discuss how they don't understand how a summoner's talent works. The headmaster comments to the young man beside him that the story of the rank E boy is real, just as Lord Rosen prophesied. Alan is confused by this conversation. The headmaster asks the young Helmios if the inspection system is broken. All the kids realize that boy looks very young. Helmios approaches Alan and wonders how his status resembles that of a mage even without talents. Alan gets startled hearing Helmios talk about his personal characteristics. The young man says that Alan can proceed to the next test. He also asks Alan to show his summoner ability, which he hasn't seen yet. Cecil asks Alan to do it already, but the boy asks Helmios to introduce himself first. Helmios introduces himself as a great hero. This leaves Cecil and Alan impressed. Little Alan says he's never heard of that boy and asks him to use the machine. The hero then says that won't be a problem. When he does his inspection, everyone is impressed. Cecil even comments that he is stronger than her own sword master. Alan realizes that this is a hero with many physical attributes. Helmios then announces that it's now time for that boy. He calls for little Chorosuk. Alan says that this is his talent. Helmios observes how the protagonist's talent works. The boy states that even a hero won't be able to read his bonus status. Alan leaves that place and Cecil gets annoyed with how he acted. The boy thinks to himself that 1 out of every 3 people fails the exam. Now the academic test will begin and the boy finds it strange that there's no practical exam. During the test, he thinks that this feels like the last exam he took. Shortly after, everyone passes the evaluation. The headmaster asks the successful candidates to organize themselves to get their uniforms. Cecil asks what the accommodations will be like. Alan suggests they rent a house to live in together and the friends agree. He also says that before entering, they should register for adventurer certification. At the Adventurers Guild, they prepare for certification. The little boy says he wants to buy rank D magic stones. His friends comment that it's strange how 100 silver coins are only worth 1 gold coin. The clerk replies that she will only accept 10 gold coins and that there will be a dungeon if they want to earn more. She hands the certificates to the young ones. As they leave, she asks if they will explore the dungeons together, and Alan confirms. The boy tells another clerk that they want to register as a team and wonders what name to use. Alan suggests calling themselves Game Junkies, and Cecil asks what that means. The boy says it means those who bet everything to reach the top, and everyone likes the idea. And the boy thinks that in his previous life he only occupied himself with work, and now he can have a truly majestic life. He also says that his main goal is to become the strongest. Still with the clerk, the boy says he has more questions. Sometime later, Alan is satisfied with the answers and Cecil asks if they can look for a house now. Later, a man shows a large house to the young ones. They see that it's close to the dungeons and the rent is 10 gold coins per month. Alan says they will sign the contract and his friend asks if he became rich. In the dining room a few hours later, Alan and Cecil prepare to tell a story to their friends. Upon hearing the story of the Demon King, the two friends get quite scared. Young Alan says that he and Cecil will defeat the king. The girl says she's in and will participate as well. She asks Dogora if he will also be part of that plan. But Alan knows how difficult this is and asks everyone to think carefully before making this decision. Dogora comments that if helping to kill the Demon King means being remembered as a hero, then he's in. Then a book starts floating in the air, scaring everyone. In it, it says that Cecil, Dogora, and Karina have become team members. The four of them wonder what that is. Cecil says it's floating on Alan's finger like his summoned beasts. The boy realizes that this happened because they are now a team. Alan says that to defeat the Demon King, they will need to practice in the dungeons, equip themselves, and have a teammate with a recovery talent. He continues, saying that his growth rate at birth was equivalent to 100 people. Now he states that he needs to find someone with magic recovery in that city. The friends realize that's why he is always collecting magic stones. And together, they promise to do their best as the game junkies. On the first day of class, Alan walks alongside Karina, Cecil, and Dogora through the main courtyard of the magic school. While heading to the classroom, Alan reflects on how difficult it was to be accepted among so many enrolled students. The protagonist enters the room and, observing the environment, concludes that he was placed in the first year of high school. Professor Karlova introduces himself, says he was the head of the Adventurers Guild in the capital, and was called because of the Sword Master. Dogora gets excited seeing that Karina is in the same class. Cecil comments that Karina is quite famous, while Alan says that the Adventurers Guild supports the alliance of the 5 continents. Karlova says that the class is made up of all types of people, so it doesn't matter where someone comes from. During the explanation, he tells the students to stop using honorific titles and to forget the past because they are all students now. Alan suggests that they speak freely from now on, leaving Cecil surprised by the change. She gets irritated by how naturally he speaks and grabs him from behind. The boy tries to resist the attack but complains that he has lost all his strength. While Cecil suffocates her classmate, Karlova asks the class to learn from their relationship. A teacher informs them that the schedule has 6 days a week with 4 hours each day. In the morning, they study general knowledge, and in the afternoon, they are divided into specific classes like swordsmanship, magic, and axe mastery. Since there is no class for summoners, Alan is free in the afternoons and can visit other classes. During the first day off from school, the boy and his team head out to face a level C dungeon located in the city. Karina and Alan excitedly celebrate going to the dungeon, while Cecil gets irritated seeing how happy the two are about it. In the dungeon lobby, the group receives an identification plate and is instructed to head to room number 205. They climb the stairs toward room 205 on the second floor, and Alan comments that the place looks like a hotel. 2 adventurers wish the academy students good luck, and the boy thanks them. While Dover observes the amount of luggage, Karina praises Alan for the logistics, and Cecil talks about the costs. The group arrives at the room, and upon opening the door, they react in surprise to what they see inside. Floating cubes present themselves as the dungeon system and announce that they will guide them to the mission dimension. Karina is startled to see the cube talking, Dogora is surprised, and Alan questions what it meant by dimension. The system explains that each room has its own entrance, preventing different groups from using the same path in the dungeon. Surprised, Alan compares the experience to a private game server. The protagonist celebrates excitedly upon realizing that he can use his magical creatures without revealing his secrets to the world. Alan raises his hand to ask the cube a question while Karina and Cecil don't understand what he's thinking. After answering the questions, the system authorizes entry and activates the room's mechanism. Before entering, Alan cheers up the group with a shout of encouragement, calling them game junkies. They enter, observe the environment, and with enthusiasm, Alan takes the lead and encourages the group to move forward. Before they can move, a flock of magical birds flies in front of them, leaving everyone impressed. As they walk, Dogora notices that the place is lit even without torches or windows. Alan checks the map in his book and indicates the way. He tells them to take the shortest path and warns about traps in the chests. After that, he opens the book to check the status of the new team members. The book reveals detailed stats of the 3, showing their talents, equipment, skills, and experience levels. With this information, Alan smiles suspiciously, making Karina suspicious of his excitement. The protagonist then warns Cecil that there's an enemy ahead. Nervous, she replies that she already noticed and attacks the monster with the fireball. After defeating the enemy, the group receives a notification in the book informing them of the gain of 8 experience points. Smiling with relief, Cecil celebrates having defeated a monster alone for the first time. Alan reminds Dogora and Karina that they also have skills, leaving both surprised. The protagonist reads his friend's skills aloud, but both don't understand anything and complain about the lack of explanation at the academy. When they finish talking, Alan asks Karina and Dogura to face the two enemies approaching. The two then attack with full force, delivering accurate strikes against the monsters. After defeating them, Dogura gets excited knowing that the monsters drop magic stones, and Alan comments that he likes collecting them. Karina is surprised by the feeling of being stronger, and Alan informs her that she leveled up for the first time. The leader encourages the group to keep up the pace and says he believes in all of them. After more than 10 hours, the group returns, satisfied for having completed the first floor of the dungeon in a single day. Knowing that the dungeon saves progress from the previous day, Alan found a way to take advantage of this. He organized his summoned creatures to hunt on their own while he returned to school with peace of mind. With this strategy, he will be able to collect around 200 magic stones per day. During the 5th day of study, the group reaches the 6th floor of the dungeon. On the lower floor of the dungeon, the group comes across a rank C boss and 10 rank D monsters ready for battle. Facing the boss, they get excited about the opportunity to see Alan fight, and he assures them that he is ready to use his powers. Before the battle, he comments that he used 35,000 magic stones and 7,000 orbs to strengthen his summon. The protagonist commands his summoned bear to attack the enemy group with the special skill, Bite. After the victory in the first attack, the group is impressed by the size of the summoned beast. A chest appears before the group, and Alan informs them that they have received a reward. Upon opening it, the protagonist receives a steel sword as a reward. He then suggests selling the sword at the weapon shop, leaving Dogura confused. The sword is sold for 1 gold coin, while the group reflects on the high cost of living. While eating, the group decides that they can use the remaining time to focus on their studies. Back at school, Alan thinks about how convenient dungeons are, especially because they allow teleportation. Cecil sighs and says that she suddenly feels very tired. Karina comments that she is happy with her own progress. Alan smiles, satisfied to see that everyone is comfortable with the routine of battles and training. Mangas arrive, and Karlova announces that after the vacation there will be a dungeon test, and those who fail will be expelled from school. He emphasizes that the test will be in groups of up to 8 students, without external help, and warns that 20 people died the previous year. The students react in shock to the announcement of the test, unable to believe it. Alan comments to Cecil that those who do not know the story of the Demon King do not understand the situation. While Karina is being pursued by several classmates, the rest of the class panics trying to form their own teams. Karina hesitates in front of the insistent invitations, and Alan intervenes, asking his team to stand up. He announces that the team has already completed 2 C-rank dungeons and is looking for a cleric for support and healing. The classmates react surprised to learn that they have already completed 2 dungeons. Alan says that the new team member must participate in at least one of the 2 weekly expeditions. He highlights that exploring dungeons requires fully trusting the abilities of the team members. With a smile, he says that by limiting the number of members, everyone receives more rewards. The students react in shock and silence upon discovering that the Sword Master is already part of the group. Alan reassures a classmate, reinforcing that he is open to hearing any concerns. The classmates show gratitude and excitement towards Alan, who responds with friendliness and a willingness to help. Karina observes the protagonist with admiration, impressed by his attitude. Still without a volunteer, Cecil says that the class does not seem to have anyone with healing talent. During the lunch break, they arrive at the hall, and Karina gets excited about the buffet. While serving himself, Alan is approached by a new student. Kill introduces himself as a cleric and asks about the requirements to join his group. Alan invites him to talk during lunch, but he says he does not eat lunch. The protagonist observes the classmate's physique and mentally questions why he does not eat. Believing the reason to be money, he shares 2 silver coins with a new classmate so that he can also eat. The cleric reluctantly accepts the coins and apologizes, showing wounded pride. Karina, realizing that Kill was hungry, serves a large portion on his plate. During the meal, Kill resumes the subject and directly asks about the income generated by the dungeons. Alan hesitates for a moment upon hearing the question, showing caution before answering. Impressed by the income mentioned by Alan, Kill asks to join the explorations. After being accepted, he says he can participate in the next expedition over the weekend. Karina and Dogura welcome Kill enthusiastically, offering food and warmly welcoming the new team member. Alan is extremely satisfied to have finally gotten a cleric on the team. Kill comments on Alan's politeness. Alan responds casually, telling him not to worry. On the first day of exploration after Kill joins the team, the young cleric wonders if the practice has had any effect. Karina asks if that is the first time the boy has leveled up. Alan comments that if everyone works together, they will be able to defeat all the beasts and become stronger. While the summoner distributes tasks to each person, Kill seems surprised to be considered a team member. 2 weeks later, on a lower floor of a C-rank dungeon, the group encounters several beasts. Cecil leads the attack, and the others follow her without hesitation, taking down every monster along the way. After the brief combat, Alan considers that C-rank monsters are no match for the team. Noticing that Dogura is injured, Kill goes over to heal a boy. Impressed, the protagonist asks if the cleric studied magic at school. But the boy explains that he already mastered the spells before that, as he had worked as a healer in a church. Alan thinks that it was an incredible job, since he was a servant of a noble family. All the members of the group are impressed by Kill's ability, who comments that it took him 2 months to master it. In the middle of the conversation, the cleric notices a silver chest, which he believes contains treasures. Inside, they find a mithril hand shield worth 15 gold coins. Alan then splits the money, giving Kill 3 coins plus an amount in magic stones. Happy with the profitable mission, the healer asks if he can officially join the adventurer group. The protagonist replies that the boy is very welcome to game junkies, and the others celebrate his arrival enthusiastically. With that, Alan is able to visualize the new colleague's status in his book and invites him to live in the house that the team uses as a base. Kill refuses the offer and runs away, promising to see everyone the next day. After the boy leaves, Cecil comments that he doesn't seem to be a noble. The protagonist agrees, saying that without a noble's obligation, the cleric won't have to go to the battlefields. Even so, he knows that game junkies needs a healer. Despite the strange first impression, that Rupert's excited to meet Kill again the next day and hopes that he joins the meal. The protagonist wakes everyone up with his enthusiastic shouts as he runs out of the base. His happiness comes from the fact that he has leveled up several skills and activated a new one called Awakening. When checking his grimoire, he learns about 3 new beasts. Suddenly, a new creature appears in front of him, the spirit Maria, who can communicate with the boy. He is impressed by the ghost's abilities, including the ability to pass through walls. To test the evolution of his skills, Alan summons Denka, who in turn summons a swarm of insects. Frightened, the protagonist wonders what the awakening of other creatures will be like. Back at the base, the summoner introduces Maria to his group members. Cecil notices the excitement of the dark-haired boy, who responds that he is eager to use his new ability in a dungeon. 2 days later, the game junkies are at school when they discover that 3 special guests will visit the campus that day. The students get excited to see the masters. Karina stands up to ask Doberg, the sword master, how to use the slashing skill. The man asks why she wants to use this skill, and the girl says she wants to get stronger because Alan can also use it. Doberg is surprised that the black-haired boy has this ability. The man calls Karina, and the two step aside to talk. They stand face to face with their swords ready so that the girl can show what she is capable of. Alan worries about his friend's safety, while Cecil wonders how she can match a master with years of experience. Karina charges with determination. However, Doberg easily blocks her strike and pushes the girl away. He tells her to try using the skill, but even then, the girl cannot break through the master's defenses. Once again, Karina is thrown far with a simple sword movement. The master taunts her, implying that she is not ready, but the young swordswoman gets up ready to continue. As she keeps trying to fight Doberg, Alan and Cecil watch with concern. The hero Helmios asks the protagonist if they should start a battle too, but the dark-haired boy refuses. He's irritated because Karina has been fighting the sword master for 8 hours, and it doesn't seem like he is going to teach her any technique. The girl does not give up and remembers that some time ago she noticed that Alan was always thinking about something during battles. She knows that her friend has a big dream, so she needs to get stronger. Finally, Doberg advises her to focus only on using the skill and try attacking him again. Karina charges and successfully uses the slash on the master, who this time does not defend. He tells her to remember this feeling the next time she tries to use the slash. Very exhausted, the girl faints. As the colleagues gather to give Karina a healing potion, Helmios asks why Doberg didn't tell the girl what to do. The muscular man replies that that was the best way. However, the hero thinks that the demonstration was excessive since the girl is only 12 years old. He also asks Alan what the boy's dream is, but the young summoner says he will only tell when he can trust the hero. In a C-rank dungeon, the protagonist informs the group that he was waiting for the exploration to show the creatures he can summon. He then summons large birds, which serve as transportation for the team members. Each child rides a creature, and they continue their exploration. When an enemy approaches, Karina prepares to show her flying sword skill. She launches the attack and says that with that strike, she can do anything. Before they return to exploring, Maria points out that one of the protagonist's magic stones fell. The game junkies continue on their way riding the giant creatures, and the boy thinks that now they are a beast cavalry. They reach the last floor of the dungeon and Cecil comments that they have already managed to defeat the boss. At that moment, Alan looks at Kill and wonders why the cleric still refuses to eat, even though he has money. With the completion of the 3rd C-rank dungeon, the group decides to celebrate the achievement, as well as the arrival of the new member. But the young healer quickly says that he would feel bad about his family if he went to a party. He says that the 8 members of his family moved to the city when he enrolled in the academy. However, the others still haven't found work, so it felt wrong to be at a party at that moment. With encouragement from Cecil, Alan invites Kill to take care of the base house and asks if the boy would like to move there with his family. The dark-haired boy would even pay an amount for the job. But the young cleric is touched by the camaraderie gesture from the group leader. To make everything very clear, Cecil decides that the treasures found will be divided by 6, with the last share going to Kill's family. She explains that with this agreement, all the magic stones will stay with Alan, who needs them to level up. With everything decided, the group gets excited to prepare a celebration party. Kill and his entire family arrive at the base and are greeted by Maria. Nina, the cleric's younger sister, introduces herself with a bow, which surprises Alan. However, the healer says that he will talk to the protagonist about his family later. During the big meal, Kill thanks them once again for the opportunity and asks Alan not to treat him so formally. Upon hearing this, Cecil asks if the boy is a noble. The cleric explains that his title was stripped, so now he lives with the other servants who also had nowhere to live. He continues saying that he has already gotten used to civilian life, but his sister Nina still struggles. The protagonist comments that he and Karina were servants who were recently promoted to civilians. Surprised, the young healer says that he thought Alan and Cecil were nobles. The girl confirms the information but says that she doesn't need to be treated differently. Seeming more relaxed, Kill says that he feels envious of the group's friendship, who have known each other for so long, and asks where they are from. Alan replies that he, Karina, Cecil, and Dogara are from the Grandriel territory. This surprises the cleric again, who realizes that the mage is the heir to the Grandriel family. Quite irritated, he shouts that it was her who defeated his family, the Calmal House. Then he asks what his family did to deserve the punishment that the Grandriel gave them. Alan remembers that Caproni Calno, the head of the family, told him that he was happy to have a child without talent Nina. While he remains lost in thought, Cecil decides to talk privately with Kill to explain what really happened. The two step away from the team and the cleric demands to know the truth. Thus, the young noble explains that, in fact, Kill's father was the one who had a plan to rob the Grandriel family. He hired a group of assassins who kidnapped Cecil and Alan. After hearing this, Karina and Dogara are shocked. The girl says that it is true that her father defeated the cleric's family, but none of it is her fault. She adds that he should look for proof of what really happened in the capital. Alan appears and, seeing Kill devastated, asks what his relationship with his father was. The boy explains that his father took care of him until he was 5 years old. But everything changed after his talent evaluation ceremony. Now he no longer has memories of his parents. He only knows that the couple left him in another city to live with the servants. Therefore, he has been used to living as a civilian since childhood. Kill continues his story, saying that when he turned 10, his parents sent a tutor to teach him. His father said that the teacher would help him prepare for the academy. The idea of fulfilling his role within the family made the boy excited. However, in October, his parents made several budget cuts, firing many servants and sending Kill away from the house. They left Nina with her brother and then disappeared, so the boy was forced to work at the church. Sometime later, a royal emissary appeared and told the young cleric that the Grandriel family was to blame for the downfall of the Calmal House. The boy remembers that the emissary informed him that the obligation of nobles changed from 3 to 5 years of fighting monsters. Disappointed with what he discovered, Kill says he is going to leave the team. But he, his sister, and his new family still need a place to live while he works to revive the Calmal House. Alan says that everyone there has a duty and they will fulfill it together. The protagonist gives a speech and says that it doesn't matter which family Kill belongs to because he is now part of the game Junkies. Besides, fulfilling the duty is very dangerous, so the group needs the cleric. At that moment, Cecil comments that her brother died while fulfilling his duty. This information leaves everyone shocked and saddened. Determined, Alan says that together they will level up and become strong enough to defeat the Demon King. Kill has a sort of existential crisis and says that he doesn't want to use the group to achieve his own goals. The boy doesn't care about defeating the Demon King. He just wants to become a noble again. To the cleric's surprise, the group members continue supporting him and are determined to face everything together. This moves him to the point of crying. The next day, Kill's family offers their help to the game Junkies. Even after a day has passed, Alan remains excited about the new residents at the house. However, he also questions whether the words of a royal emissary are trustworthy, and what the Calmal family will think about Kill's actions. The game Junkies are about to set off on an adventure when Nina shows concern for her brother. However, the cleric reassures the girl, saying that his friends are very strong. Thus, the group leaves excited to explore a B-rank dungeon. At the dungeon, the receptionist warns the children not to be reckless. Analyzing the place, Dogora comments that it looks like a C-rank dungeon. The protagonist says that it takes twice as long to complete missions at this level, but still hopes to finish it in a month. The boy informs the group that they will face many traps, so it's better for everyone to take antidotes before starting. Riding the giant birds, they begin the exploration. On the 4th floor, Kill gets excited when he finds a treasure chest. However, Cecil warns that it might be a trap. Mariev is in charge of checking the chest, which immediately transforms into a huge monster. Alan guides the spirit, and she defeats the beast. The boy is happy to see that the treasure is worth 50 coins, but the children are attacked by another beast. This time, Dogara is the one who eliminates the enemy using his full-body armor skill. Everyone is happy with the achievement of a dungeon at that level. The following month in July, the group explores the B-rank dungeon again. Face to face with the boss, a 5-meter-tall boar, the youngsters wonder how they are going to defeat it. While each one uses their powers to defeat the creature, Alan reflects that the others are about to reach his level. Karina delivers a precise sword strike, finishing off the giant boar for good. The children are happy to have defeated a monster of that level. After the fight, Kill uses his healing power to restore the health of his allies. At that moment, he spots a silver chest. Inside are gauntlets made of a flaming material, worth 1,000 gold coins. Once again, Alan notices how much the cleric seems to love money. In addition, He thinks about the group's evolution rate and how much he still needs to strengthen to defeat the Demon King. The protagonist calculates how many magic stones and gold coins he will have by the end of each B-rank mission. He also remembers that with the profits from the tasks, he bought a magic compass and built more stables. During the month of August, the children go on vacation from the academy. In Karina's village, Alan's family is enjoying a moment together when suddenly a bird lands on the window. The bird is holding a basket, and when it opens its beak, it starts speaking with the boy's voice. He tells his family that he is still at school and can use that bird to transmit his voice. The boy's parents are shocked by that ability. Meanwhile, one of his brothers finds the letters for Dogora's and Karina's families inside the basket. Alan and his father exchange information about how each one's life is going, and the boy learns that his father was appointed as the village chief. The bird appears again, but this time in Grand Brio. Through the bird, the boy tells a mustached man what has been happening at the academy and about the surprising encounter between Kill and Cecil. He takes the opportunity to ask if the Calnell family can really regain an ability after the cleric's 5 years of service. The man, who is Cecil's father, replies that there is a possibility since that was a message from the king. However, he also warns that it could all be a plan by the king to use Kill's healing power on the battlefield. He says it's possible that even after the years of service, the cleric may not return to being a noble, but he's glad to have a healer near his daughter. After hearing this, Alan understands that the emissary was sent to convince Kill to fulfill his duty even after becoming a civilian. He knows that the cleric loves his family and would do anything to become a noble again, so he decides to help his friend. Cecil's father asks if the protagonist could get into trouble for having told him about the emissary's message, but the boy simply says that there are still many things to happen before the game junkies reach the battlefield. Therefore, the best thing the man can do is wait for more news. At the base, Alan tells his friends about his suspicion that the king is only trying to use Kill for his own purposes. The youngsters are shocked to consider this possibility. While Dobra starts to consider the messenger an enemy, Cecil suggests they wait for the capital's reaction to the report her father sent. Hearing everything, Kill simply thanks his friends and says that he still needs money, so the group should explore more dungeons. In September, with only 1 month left before summer vacation, the group prepares to challenge an A-rank dungeon. In the room, we discover that fewer than 10 teams manage to reach the required level to participate. The adult in charge then says that even though the youngsters are very strong, it's still better to be careful. Thinking to himself, the protagonist says that on the lower floor of the dungeon, there is an A-rank boss he has never seen before. He then notices how the blonde boy has been sad since learning the truth about the Imperial emissary. We learn that the dungeon has a lot of subdivisions and complicated paths, with its end being unknown, and that it is allowed to sleep inside while exploring. Alan chose to summon beasts to stand guard so he could sleep peacefully. The deeper the group goes, the more B-rank monsters they encounter, like Orc Kings and even Cyclops. Quickly, the team advances on the enemies. Karina announces that she's finished, while one of the boys says he's almost done. After some time, the only one left is the big enraged Cyclops. Dogera is attacked, being healed by another boy. We see that the healer and Cecil, who are on top of summons, end up falling into a teleport trap that forcibly takes the person to anywhere in the dungeon. Shouting, Alan says he will leave Karina to take care of the Cyclops. The girl agrees with the plan. Thinking, the protagonist reveals that he prepared healing potions and magic fruits, but the items have a limit, so he needs to find the missing pair quickly. He then decides to give a mana seed and a life leaf to one of his summons, asking it to help him find his friends, and 30 minutes later, he informs the others that he found them. Heading to the place, our boy tells Kill and Karina to hold tight to the Franz, then activates the creature's dash ability. Far from there, we see Cecil using her fire spear. Muriel approaches and asks her to use the life leaf. Dobra is also nearby and has just defeated a monstrous creature. The trio finally arrives just in time. Approaching, the pair who were fighting earlier thank Alan for the extra help. Our boy looks at the sad boy and says that when he is in trouble, he will also be helped. Kill smiles, happy to have someone he can count on. Next, the group decides to hold a meeting to discuss how they can be more careful. September comes to an end, specifically the day when the youngsters will conquer the last floor. The healer boy finally feels calmer about the situation. However, inside the last floor of the dungeon, the group encounters an A-rank magical beast. It is the Great Warrior, a creature that is about 10 meters tall. The protagonist then says that they were lucky since the first fight was against an armored type with strong resistance. When opening the team's status window, he realizes that he is falling behind, then wonders if he should change his cards to use a new formation, with the goal of reaching the lead. Approaching the great beast, our boy summons a team of cabios. Then he sets the firepower to the maximum. Several explosions occur, which makes Alan proud of his own spell. However, to the group's misfortune, the great beast is still alive and standing, now aiming at Karina with its massive fist. We see that the girl was apparently hit by the blow, leaving the entire team very worried. To everyone's relief, the young girl is beneath the creature's fist, blocking the attack with her weapon. Kill activates his healing skill to help his friend. Meanwhile, Dogora charges at the enemy with full force. Delivering a strike called Violent Revenge, recovered, Alan's best friend says it's her turn now. She then launches an attack called Red Lotus. The protagonist says that he and Cecil should take advantage of the opportunity created by the pair. Thus, the group launches a full-on attack, from which the Great Warrior cannot escape. With victory, the group earns 400,000 experience points. Happy, the youngsters celebrate completing the most difficult difficulty level. Holding the magic stone, Alan says the item is really big. Suddenly, the treasure chest appears. Upon opening it, Dogger receives the Scarletite Axe, much better than the Mithril Axe. Panting, our boy thinks that this isn't even a real battlefield, but it was very intense. The voice from the magic cube appears to deliver the A-rank dungeon completion certificate to the team. Holding the paper, the protagonist wonders if that is some kind of stamp card. The voice then says that after the group obtains 5 dungeon completion marks, the card will transform into a certificate, which will grant free access to enter an S-rank dungeon. Afraid, the team starts thinking about how huge the boss of that place must be, thus ending the summer of adventures. The month of October arrives and Alan, now 13 years old, returns to school after the vacation. A young girl approaches and says that thanks to the boy's advice, her team managed to complete the C-rank dungeon. Suddenly, a boy ends up telling everyone the protagonist group completed the A-rank dungeon. Karina asks what her friend will do after class, and he says he will practice more swordsmanship to get stronger. Excited, the girl asks him to practice with her, but the protagonist refuses due to the power difference between them. The Sword King appears and, taking Karina away, says that she will practice with him. Alan then decides to practice with Lifo, and in his thoughts, he says that the boy reminds him of his fights with Mihi. 3 hours later, we see the Holy Swordswoman exhausted after practicing a bit with the Sword King, who says that she is different after the vacation. Our boy approaches, and the man tells the pair that the principal would like to see them. On the way to the office, the swordsman asks what the boy will do now that he has obtained the A-rank dungeon completion certificate. Explaining, Alan says that before they graduate, they will finish the S-rank, then asks if the man has explored anything. The swordsman says he has completed only 3 A-rank dungeons, and that since Mr. Doberg completed an S-rank dungeon, no one else has succeeded. Until the boy arrives, who will surely succeed. Pointing his finger, he says the principal's office is over there. Inside a monument, the man thanks the pair for coming. Unable to hold her curiosity, Karina asks the principal if he is an elf. He says yes, and that despite his appearance, he is 1,000 years old, having been responsible for managing the academy for 43 years. Thinking, Alan says that's why he couldn't read the man's mind. Getting straight to the point, the principal says he would like them to participate in the school's martial arts festival convention. Our boy says he has never heard of the event. The swordsman then says it's because the festival is only announced starting from the 2nd year. Continuing, the elf states that many distinguished guests will be present, including the king of Rathashu. Intrigued, Alan asks if the man shouldn't call Dogor to go in his place, but the principal says the boy is not a qualified candidate. The protagonist concludes that the elf wants to see the maximum potential of the summoner, and therefore decides to refuse, stating that his summoning abilities cannot be shown to the world, and that if he is forced to participate, he will lose on purpose. Karina accepts, and the principal reveals that the winner will challenge the sword master named Doberg. One day before the festival, 3 guests go to the group's house. They are the Baron, Lifo, and the leader of the Knights. Granbiel immediately recognizes Kill and Mina, children of Kalnal, because of their resemblance. The man then says that he had already asked the Viscount about the revival of the Kalnal family, but the Viscount said he never promised that. Therefore, he decided to bring a contract that allows the duo to revive their family, with only one condition: to dedicate 5 years to the battlefield. The Baron also says that he swears by the honor of the Granbiels and the Hamiltons, and Lifo takes the opportunity to introduce himself to Kill. Lifo will testify in place of his father. Alan then says that in that world, many fathers don't care about their own children. Smiling, Lifo reveals that while Kill is completing his duty, the rest of his family will be taken care of by the Hamiltons. Intrigued, the young man asks why Granbiel is doing so much for him. The man then asks the boy not to worry because if a person is a noble, they must take responsibility for their actions and do what needs to be done. He then reveals that the royal messenger who used to go out with Kalnal actually served the same royal figure. That figure is Crown Prince Inbol von Ratashu, grandson of the current king and likely successor to the throne. Everyone is shocked. Alan thinks to himself that the guy who deceived Kill and kidnapped Cecil is still out there. The boy from the Kalnal family thanks everyone for their help, saying he will do whatever it takes. Cecil smiles and says she is happy for the boy and his sister. Before leaving, Granbiel says he will stay for the martial arts festival because he wants to see Krenna's performance. The next day, many people show up at the festival to watch and judge the warriors who will fight against the demon army. Alan gets irritated when he sees that Inbel is present. Meanwhile, his friend seems to have won her first fight. The announcer declares that the girl is the champion, being incredible for having defeated a third-year student while being only in the first year. Anxious, the girl's friends comment that her next fight will be against Doberg. The two stand face to face, and we learn that the man is known for always defeating the tournament champions. Doberg stares at Karina, who says she has gotten stronger. The man then says that he is the one who hunts demon beasts, the one who slaughters demon tribes, and the one who exterminates demon gods. Therefore, she can go all out and use whatever, is within her reach. The girl charges forward using the flying sword technique and Thunder King. However, her attacks don't work. Her opponent prepares to strike as she advances again. Both swords clash with full force. The clash throws the girl backward. Dobberg asks if that's all she's got. Krena's friends get nervous. On the ground, she thinks about how powerful the blow she received was. Shouting, the man asks if the girl wants to give up already, but she replies that she does not. They both resume attacking each other frantically, with the girl seemingly getting the worst of it. After some time, we see the girl badly beaten, saying that she still wants to fight, but she ends up collapsing on the ground shortly after. Once again, Dobberg wins. Looking at the girl, he asks if she got stronger because of her friends. Without answering, we find out that Krena was rushed to the public health station with serious injuries. Alan approaches and uses the life leaf, making his friend quickly stand up. Crying, the girl says that she did her best but couldn't land a single hit. The protagonist then asks her not to be so disappointed since she proved to everyone that she had become stronger. Steven, next year she will surely be able to defeat Dobberg easily. Cecil appears and says that her friend did a good job. Suddenly, someone clapping says it was a beautiful fight and that it's been 10 years since he saw two sword masters compete. It's Inbel, who then asks if Granville would like to talk. Surprised, the Viscount asks what the man would like to talk about. The prince replies that the royal family should reward the lord of a land that produces champions. They both head into a room with a dark tone. The prince tells Granville to sit down. The protagonist suddenly appears and points out where his lord should sit, leaving Inbel confused. We discover that it was all part of the boy's plan to listen in on the conversation. In his thoughts, he says that his friends are safe with the leader of the knights, so now he needs to figure out what the prince is plotting. Cynically, the royal man says that everything Granville did, including the destruction of the councils, will soon be known all over the world. A little uncomfortable, the Viscount says that destroy is not exactly the right word. Inbel then asks the man to let his daughter, Karina, and the Calno boy go to the battlefield. Interrupting, our boy says that he is the captain of the members the man just mentioned, and that he needs to protect Cecil at all costs. Hearing this makes the prince smile. With no way out, Granville says that if that is the king's will, he has no objection, while Alan thinks the man should be thanking him. 3 months later, we see that the protagonist's skill enhancement has reached level 7, and that the group has completed another A-level dungeon, obtaining many treasures such as weapons and armor made of scarletite and adamantite, and a newly introduced ring that increases attributes. Then January arrives, the day when the team will challenge the dungeon boss, the strongest boss called the Heavy Dragon. Kittle says that dragons are usually solitary, while Dogora says he's trembling with excitement. Ignoring the advice he received from the guild members, Alan states that he will fight because that's what he desires most when entering a dungeon. He decides to change the position of his cards to optimize attack power. Everyone gets ready with their respective weapons. The protagonist then warns that he will deliver the first blow and that the others should be careful of the dragon's breath. After striking, he thinks that, as expected, Cecil's preemptive attack is the most appropriate. Then he launches a KBO bomb rain. However, when the dust settles, we see that the monster is still standing. And surprising everyone, it asks how the boy dares to challenge it with a team of only 5 people. Karina is in shock, while the enemy says that the ignorant must be punished. Alan decides to launch another KBO bomb rain, celebrating that he managed to reduce the creature's power a bit, which despite everything continues speaking. Mounted on their Fran, the team attacks at the same time, causing the dragon to split into 5. When Karina attacks, we discover that the dragon's skin is very tough or has physical resistance as nothing happens. Irritated, the dragon launches its breath for the first time. The protagonist activates his self-sacrifice ability and saves everyone, leaving the monster confused. Dogora feels relieved, but Alan warns that the dragon will fire again. Cecil decides to move forward, stating that if you can defend, there's nothing to fear. She and the protagonist then launch a joint attack. However, since the dragon does not attack, our boy realizes that it is concentrating energy. Shouting, he says that things are about to get dangerous and orders everyone to move away. The problem is that the monster doesn't wait and launches its powerful attack, which only doesn't hit the team thanks to the Teku. Thinking, our boy says that a single breath wiped out 4 summons at once, and that if Kittle or Cecil get hit, they will die. With no time to summon other creatures, he mentally apologizes to Karina and Dogora. The great dragon breathes again, blasting the 3 young ones far back. Worried, Cecil asks Kill to activate his healing ability, while Alan asks if his friends are okay. The youngsters get angry upon seeing that the dragon is about to launch another breath, and we realize that Karina is not doing well. However, determined, Alan says that he knows enough about the opponent and that they still have a chance to win. The rest of the team decides to trust their captain. Our boy then asks everyone to stay behind him, but his childhood friend disobeys, showing that something is very wrong. The girl charges forward without hesitation, while the dragon says she's in a hurry to die. Then what we see is the girl getting hit directly by a breath. Kill is shocked, while the protagonist tells the girl to come back and eat a life leaf. However, Karina remains standing even after taking the full attack. Aiming at one of the dragon's legs, she uses her sword to cut it off. The creature starts screaming while the Holy Sword's woman lands on the ground, revealing that she has awakened her extra skill called Limit Break. we see that the magical beast is still standing. Shocked, Dogora says that he and the protagonist saw the girl's extra skill for the first time when they were 5 years old. Looking at Kirina's status, Alan is impressed to see that the girl's physical strength recovery is at 1% per second. Furious, the dragon throws the sword's wound far away, calling everyone human trash. To its misfortune, its opponent is now stronger than ever. Determined not to surrender, the monster prepares to launch another breath, but is stopped by the girl, who strikes its belly with her sword. A message appears, informing that the heavy dragon has been defeated and the reward is 1,600,000 experience points. With her mouths open, the team is left speechless, not understanding how Kirina did everything alone. She approaches and Alan asks if his friend is okay. With a big smile, the girl says that she defeated the dragon. Kill praises the girl's extra skill, while the protagonist laments not having one and Cecil gets curious to know more. However, the healer draws his friend's attention to point out the golden chest that just appeared. Kirina picks up a ring impressed by the item. Putting the object on her finger, our boy says that maybe that is the healing magic ring he's been looking for. Quickly discovering he was wrong, the axe user says it's sad, but there's still hope. Cecil approaches and asks Alan if maybe they could defeat the white dragon. The other youngsters get excited, but the protagonist kills the joy, stating that it's still not possible, since Kirina awakening her extra skill was pure luck, and if they do that, Kil might not return as a lord. Given that Kalnil is under the royal family's domain, and if the white dragon dies, the same family might not return the lands to the boy. Thus, the best way is to wait until the group's healer takes on his inheritance. The group then agrees that they will continue exploring the dungeon during the spring break. 3 months later, we discover that the team completed the 3rd A-rank dungeon. Kirina is surprised to see that she leveled up again, as did the other youngsters. Annoyed, Alan thinks about how he's the only one who hasn't reached the level cap, even though everyone is the same age. Nervous, Dogora asks how they will get stronger if they can't level up, but the protagonist states that there's still a lot of work to do. The first of which is mastering their own extra skills individually, then collecting as many powerful weapons as possible. Thinking to himself, our boy says there might still be a chance since he remembers games that set a condition to break the level cap. Since they have 2 years until they go to war, he needs to find another way to make the whole team stronger. April arrives along with the end of the summer break, and we discover that 2,600 students passed the test to enter the 2nd year. In class, everyone is amazed to see the new students. We see 3 elves. The teacher then says the trio came from the kingdoms in the northwest and northeast of the Zhangming Empire. Introducing herself, one of the girls says her name is Shopiron, and she comes from the elf kingdom of Rosenheim. The boy follows the girl and says his name is Folngal, and he is the guardian of Princess Shopi, next in line to be queen. With their mouths wide open, the youngsters are shocked to see elves, even though the principal is of the same species. Suddenly, the princess exchanges glances with the protagonist and seems to get nervous. Not understanding, Alan wonders if it's because of his hair, which is dark, stating that he's ready to fight back if the dude was looking for trouble. Finally, Maruru introduces herself, saying she's from the kingdom of Vukas and that she's a dwarf. A trio of students finds the girl very cute, while our boy thinks she looks like a tomboy. The teacher then calls the protagonist's attention and says that the new students will join his group, which only has 5 people. Reflecting, the boy says that leading 8 people instead of 5 won't be easy, but he's curious to know what the trio knows about the Demon King. Lunchtime arrives and everyone heads to the cafeteria. Taking the lead, Alan introduces himself as the captain of the Game Junkies team and says they camp inside the dungeon every day. Not caring about the last piece of information, Sophie says that she is a spirit element mage and Folmal is an archer. Maruru then says that her talent sounds strange and is called Magic Statue. Confused, the protagonist thinks they must be unique talents of each race. Cecil comments about Sophie's ability, wondering if it's the same as Alan's, while the dwarf reveals she has personal issues, which hinder her when working in a team, but her desire is to get stronger during the 2nd year, no matter what. Excited, Kirina says that everyone there is strong and will become even stronger if they stay together. Happy, the protagonist thinks everything is going well since everyone shares the same goal. After lunch, the principal approaches the boy, calling him, revealing that he's worried about the princess, who holds a much higher position in the royal family than his own. Therefore, besides Folmal, he would also like the boy to protect the girl, and the protagonist agrees and says he understands. 4 days fly by, and we discover that the group is now living in a new place, rented by our boy. Approaching the new members, he says that now that everyone will be living together, he's already apologizing in case he's ever rude. Cecil seems uncomfortable with the way Sophie treats Alan, while he says they should eat before it gets cold. However, the newly arrived elves, along with their servants, begin to pray. Explaining, Sophie says that elves are a religious race and always give thanks specifically to the one who granted them elemental magic, because elemental spirits grow according to sincere prayers until they become an elemental god. Cecil then asks if Maruru doesn't pray, and the girl says no, ever since Degragny said it was no longer necessary. The girl says she's talking about the god known as the Master of Dungeons, whom the dwarves worship, responsible for making a lot of magical devices, which her race uses as a basis to create new things. The princess asks if Alan worships anyone, and looking at the group, the boy says no. Kill reveals that he worships the creator god Elmia, and changing the subject, Dogora asks if the trio plans to try the B-rank dungeon. Shocked, the newcomers reveal they didn't know they had joined a group of people who had already reached A rank. Thinking for a moment, Alan says they can pause the A rank dungeon exploration and accompany them to the B rank. Then he informs them that for this, the group will be split into two. With no objections, everyone agrees to the plan. Thus, we discover that Cecil, Kill, and Karina are now responsible for the A-level dungeon, while Alan, Dogora, and the newcomers handle the B rank. However, the protagonist and his friends will only stay in the new team for half a day, then switch to the other group. We find out that quickly, all the newcomers of the Game Junkies team became team companions. Therefore, our boy presents his talent and his magic book, as well as the means of transportation they use, the Frand. Meanwhile, the axe user is shocked to learn that Sophie is 48 years old. Happy, the girl says that the protagonist's skill is incredible, and so everyone begins the exploration. In the dungeon, Alan tells Maruru not to push herself too much and to stay behind the others. Trying to help, the princess uses her staff to activate her healing power, a water-type spell that eases the dwarf's pain, and Sophie then says that spirit magic is good for support. Falmol then attacks with his bow and arrow, aiming at the giant spider climbing the wall. Smiling, the princess tells everyone that she and her guardian will protect the rear. Maruru apologizes for being useless, but Alan says it's okay and that there are no golems here. We discover that the girl's power consists of controlling golems and that 1 in every 10 million people possesses such a talent. Explaining, Sophie says that Vaucus is a military powerhouse because it has these creatures and uses them to block the demon army's attacks. But since Dogora and Alan are strong, being on the battlefield will be easy. But disagreeing, the protagonist says it's not quite like that. Then he asks why the girl keeps calling him Sir. Surprising everyone, the girl says it's because he is the person mentioned in the prophecy of the elemental king Rosen, who 10 years ago said that the boy with black hair was born under the Zhongying Empire, with all the minimum talents. The protagonist says that the entity must have been dreaming, but Sophie insists that this is the prophecy, which says that the great boy with black hair dancing in the sky full of light will dispel the darkness of the world. And after seeing the boy's summons, she is certain that everything is correct. Thinking, our boy says that he really wants to defeat the Demon King, but those words are very vague. But now he understands why the principal and the hero allow him to act without restrictions. Shortly after, in mid-April, in Granbeel's territory, we see Alan's summons arriving at the village, and Roden realizes immediately that it's his son. Maria introduces herself and says that she and the other beasts will help with mining. Looking at one of the creatures, Gelda says it's as big as a boar. Intrigued, Roden asks what all those things are. Explaining, Alan says they are weapons and tools that he and his friends bought. Confused, the man asks what kind of weapon that is, and the boy states that it's a scarletite spear, leaving his father confused and his uncle amazed. Whispering, Roden asks if it's really okay for him to spend so much, and the protagonist says yes, because now they have a capital of 20,000 gold coins. Speaking to Maria, the boy asks her to help everyone and that if they catch a boar, they'll let her eat it. The end of July arrives, and we see Sophie asking the others to step back because she's going to use her extra skill. It's called the Manifestation of the Great Spirit, where Nomu, the Earth Spirit, lends his power to the girl. He targets the enemy creature, striking it with many, many stones. The rest of the group is amazed by such power. Happy, the princess, who is now level 55, says that she's getting stronger, and that's why her summon didn't fail. She then reveals that Falmol also has one. However, the boy says he always saves that skill for when the princess is in danger. One day before summer vacation starts, the principal calls Alan and Karina to his office again. The man says that there is someone who would like to see the boy. It's Helmios, better known as the hero. Approaching, the man says that he and Alan are colleagues so he can drop the formalities. He then reveals that he came personally to recruit the youngsters for the martial arts conference happening in October. The protagonist says that he won't participate again since he doesn't mean to show off his skills. However, the principal states that everyone wants to know more about the summoning skill, in case he is the one mentioned in the prophecy. Reflecting, our boy concludes there must be some reason why the man is being so direct. Then he asks what the man thinks will happen if he shows up and reveals his powers to the demon army. Playing dirty, Helmios throws a ring that was on his finger to the ground, claiming that he accidentally dropped the rare magical healing ring, showing that he had the very item the protagonist had been wanting all along. Picking up the accessory, the man says that it was a gift from the Elemental King for saving the elves during that period. He then asks if the boy wants some advice on how to get one too, but Alan refuses. The man says that this ring can't even be found in S-rank dungeons, being a secret he makes sure to share. In addition, Helmios says that the dungeon master can't make magic items and that he personally asked him, but is possible to obtain orichalcum weapons in S-rank dungeons, something he doesn't advise Alan to do, since for sure some members of the group will die along the way. Annoyed, the protagonist thanks him for the information, then asks what the man wants in return. The man then says that the champion of the tournament will fight against him, and if Alan wins, he will give the boy the magic healing ring. Before answering, our boy asks to test the ring and is delighted to find that the item restores 1% mana every second. Helmios then asks if that's enough to make the boy participate in the conference. Thinking, the protagonist says that both the magic ring and meeting the elemental king are his priorities. He then announces that he withdraws his previous statement because now he will participate. Curious, he asks if he can use items in the fight, and the hero says yes, and that since there are only 2 months left, the duo should prepare. Alan replies that in that case, he'll see him in October. Thinking to himself, he states that he'll crush him in front of the entire royal family and the audience to then take the ring. Outside, the duo tells the rest of the group that they will participate in the conference for the chance to fight the hero. Everyone is shocked except Sophie, who says it will be a great opportunity for Alan to show his skills. Hill asks if the boy thinks he can win, and he replies that in his current state, no, so he will start practicing alone. Since to get stronger in 2 months, he needs new beasts, and for that, he will need to accumulate as much experience as possible. Cecil says she understands because summoners need a lot of magic stones to use their abilities. The protagonist confirms and says that his plan is to go to other cities to buy more stones, where he'll also take the chance to buy good items. Meanwhile, his friends should focus on completing the 5th A-rank dungeon to finally be able to enter the S-rank one. Excited, the princess says it will be her first time in an A-rank dungeon. Turning to Karina, Alan says that she needs to focus on mastering her extra skill before the conference. We also discover that the duo's plan is to see if, before fighting the hero,